I think we're ready to go when you want to start, Chair.
Yep. Okay, Supervisor Couch, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding the, I thought I had it. Is it? That doesn't say study session. I guess it does. Never mind, it's right in front of me. Morning, welcome to the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District study session. We have people, board members participating in person in our offices in Fresno, Bakersfield, Modesto. Before we begin, please silence your cell phones and communication devices. During the meeting, all participants will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Audio for members or the public will be unmuted once they are recognized by to make public comment. I know you're all very sad that this is my last meeting, my last time to chair this particular august agency. So we'll get right to it. First item is roll call.
Good morning. Mr. Chiesa.
I'm here.
Mr. Couch.
Here.
Mr. Pereira.
Here.
Mr. Rickman.
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Ms. Shucklian.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Mendez.
Yes, here.
Through the chair, there we have a quorum.
Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and I'll lead you in that. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item is the election of officers for 2024.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members of the study agency. This is Samir Sheikh, the executive director here. Quick tee up on this item. Wanted to quickly summarize the policy that the governing board put together. It's a selection policy for officers that includes a rotation schedule for the annual selection of the chair and vice chair, which is attached to the memo. That rotation schedule designates the chair and the vice chair based on that designated table. It was last amended on December 17th of 2020. So there is a rotation that is in place, and the recommendation before you based on that schedule and rotation is that the chairperson would be the representative from the San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Robert Rickman, and the vice chair would be the Kings County Supervisor, Rusty Robinson. And so with that brief presentation before you, that is the recommendation. And I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for discussion and action on the item.
Do we need to open it up to public comments before we take any action on this?
Yes.
So is there any member of the public that would like to make any comment on this item?
No comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public members in Modesto that would like to comment on this item?
There's no public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none in person or online.
So I'm just looking to the board for a motion.
Approval?
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Mr. Chiesa.
Yes.
Mr. Couch.
Yes.
Mr. Pereira.
Aye.
Mr. Rickman.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Mendez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, the next item is really the reason you're all here today. The recognition of myself as the outgoing chair of this agency. How do we do that?
If I could just jump in really quick, I believe there's a plaque recognizing your service to the study agency. I see it there off the screen. Wanted to thank you on behalf of the staff and the entire agency for your service on the board. There's a storied history to the study agency. I do think in the coming year we'll continue to see and some activity, quite a bit of important research in this region, nation-leading research that has been done through the work of the study agency. So do appreciate the county supervisors for their ongoing support of this process, and you in particular for this last year's role as the chair. And I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for any additional recognition that you may want to open up on your role on the study agency. Thank you.
I'm sure we have plenty of public comments, so is there anyone here that would like to make comment on this particular item? Probably none? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words, Samir. Thank you. Item 6 is the approval of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Through the
Roll
chair,
call
we
vote,
do need
please.
to take it to public comment first.
I'm sorry, any public comment on the consent agenda?
Deal and then do public comment. That's perfectly legal.
No public
Any
comment in
members-
Bakersfield?
Thank you. Any members of the public in Modesto that would like to comment?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none and online.
So I think we had a motion and a second, correct?
Correct.
So roll call
Okay,
vote.
roll. Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Schicklin?
Aye.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item is public comment. Are there any comments from the public on matters that are not on the agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the study agency? We have none here.
Are there any public members in Modesto that would like to comment?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on the study agency? Seeing none in person, we do have one online, Connie Young,
Good morning.
sorry, for the study agency.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, I'm Connie Young, Fresno resident, retired registered nurse, and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL. I hope your holidays were pleasant and restful, and you now feel ready for whatever the new year brings our way. I appreciate your making this new Zoom option available to the public and for your continuing it even now that the pandemic has subsided. Today, since you'll be discussing your legislative priorities, I'd like to tell you about CCL's legislative and other priorities for the coming year. In the areas where there is overlap between our respective priorities, perhaps we might collaborate. First, we'll keep building support for comprehensive permitting reform as a standalone bill or part of a broader spending package. Permitting reform is needed to hasten the build-out of the energy transmission infrastructure needed to meet our country's growing energy needs and add more clean energy to the mix. The Big Wires Act contains many of the permitting reform provisions we support. We'll also be monitoring legislation related to carbon border adjustment mechanisms, or CBAMs, both here and abroad. CBAMs levy tariffs on imported products whose manufacture involves significant carbon pollution. With that in mind, we support the bipartisan Prove It Act currently in the Senate. It would take stock of the emissions intensity of certain goods produced in the US compared to the emissions of those same goods produced in other countries. That will help quantify the benefits of US investments in cleaner, more efficient manufacturing practices, practices that also result in less air pollution. We'll continue to build support for the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which would put a price on carbon pollution and give the revenue to US households. We will advocate for climate provisions in the Farm Bill, things like healthy forest policies and climate-smart agriculture. Last but not least, we'll educate the community about the benefits of electrification. The Inflation Reduction Act provides numerous incentives to increase access to clean electric technology in our homes, which will also improve our air quality. Thank you.
No further comments.
Sorry. Is that all the public comments we have?
Correct, no further comments.
Okay, the next item is other business. I don't believe we have any. So we are adjourned. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District's Governing Board to order. The date is January 18th. The time is 9:12. Good morning and welcome to the meeting of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board. We have board members participating in person at our office in Fresno, Bakersfield, and Modesto. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation in person and via Zoom. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your cell phone or communication devices, such as your cell phone, to avoid interruptions in the meeting. During the meeting, all public participants on Zoom will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. For public participants on Zoom wishing to make public comment, your audio will be unmuted by the host once you're recognized to make the comment during the public commenting periods. Going to move on to item 2, roll call, please.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Bessinger.
Here.
Mr. Couch.
Here.
Ms. Escutia Brayton. Ms. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Mendez.
Here.
Dr. Pacheco Warner. Here. Mr. Pereira.
Here.
Mr. Preciado. Mr. Reyna.
I'm here.
Mr. Rickman.
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Dr. Sheriff.
Here.
Ms. Sheklian.
Here.
Mr. Chiesa.
Here.
Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. On to item 3, which is kind of a bittersweet moment here. It's the recognition of an outgoing board member, Council Member Drew Bessinger, who has faithfully served from 2018, and he's done his 2 terms, or he's completing his 2 terms. I'm going to turn it over to Samir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I want to just kick off this recognition item by quickly summarizing what has been a very busy 6-year length of time that Councilmember Bessinger served on this board. There's been quite a bit of activity over those 6 years. He's a long, decades-long public servant, having worked in law enforcement in various capacities as chief of police in various cities, municipalities, and many roles, and brought that wealth of experience in serving constituents here to this board. On a personal level, has been very, very generous with his time in helping me understand how local government works, the importance of working with constituents on addressing concerns. So just a wealth of knowledge, a great resource for me over the years and helping craft the strategies that we have here. Long advocated for public incentive funds for key programs like the Tune In Tune Up program, vehicle replacement program. Has always had an open mind to looking at innovative ways at addressing these various issues, and has been a major champion of really trying to help Valley residents get involved in cleaning up the air, but doing it in a way where we're also addressing their real needs with all the underserved communities that we have here in the San Joaquin Valley. So I really appreciate it. And I know I speak on behalf of all of us here in appreciating Councilmember Bessinger for his service on the board and the balance that he's brought in really trying to help our residents and uplift our communities here. So just on behalf again of the agency, thank you so much for your 6 years of service. And I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for any additional comments and recognition that the board may want to provide to Councilmember Bessinger.
I will, and I'm going to ask the board members also if you have anything to say, but you've been on this board much longer than I have, as is a lot of the folks on this board. And I'm continually using everyone as a mentor, trying to bring me along and understand areas that I don't have a lot of expertise in. And Drew, you've been one of those, a true champion for the Valley. And that's really what it's about here. And you don't think about Clovis, you think about the Valley and trying to improve the health of the residents, but you've gone about it in a logical way. And I heard the word balance, and I think that's what we do on this board, is we have to balance just about every decision we make. And you've been a real leader in that. So I want to tell you how much I appreciate all you've done. Sorry to see you go. I don't like the term limit thing. It doesn't work. Anyway, Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to appreciate you and just, I think that, in my experience of working with you over the years, it's part of what makes boards like these successful is really keeping public health, top of mind above everything else. And I really enjoyed that about you, and I'll miss you and wish you the best. And I'm skeptical that you're retiring, given all of you're just such a dedicated public servant, and I really appreciate everything you've done to serve all the San Joaquin Valley cities and towns over the years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Buddy?
Yeah, Drew, you've done a spectacular job since you've been here. You didn't miss a step right from day one, and I really appreciate it. You come from a great group of people, and that's the City Council of Clovis, and you've been a great representative of them here, and I really appreciate it. And I don't look forward to finding out who your replacement's going to be. Hopefully, it'll be one of the good ones.
Okay. Mayor Preciado?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just also want to give my gratitude for working with you. And, we talked during your time here. It's been a while since the Special City Commission when I met you, and I believe your heart is with the community and serve the public. Thank you for that, your commitment for that. Thank you.
Member Robinson?
Well, I'm one of the newbies, but I always appreciate a sound voice, and particularly a trusted sound voice, and your years in law enforcement, but particularly like was said, the balance that you've given here. So thank you. I'll miss you. I think I concur with Doctor that I think you'll find yourself back in public service.
Vice Chair Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to echo everyone's statements today. We've had little businesses together where I've called you to ask for help in certain areas, and you've been willing to get back in contact with me. I really appreciate that, because a lot of times in public service today, public servants don't get back to anybody. They just do their thing. But you've been willing to be a fighter, to be open, and to help us on the board. And I'm one of the newer ones. I've only been here going on 3 years now. And so I appreciate what you've done to help me here. And I wish you the best, and keep fighting the fight. Thank you.
Member Pereira?
I will say two things. Ditto, and it's been a pleasure to serve with you, Drew. Thanks.
Dr. Sheriff?
Thank you. It's a good thing that we don't have a very long agenda today, because I think this will go on and on, because we all have really appreciated working with you, and your sharing of your perspective on the retirement issue. I was reflecting, oddly enough, over the weekend about retirement and realizing, it's like being a teenager again. You get to redefine yourself. You get to think about what's the meaning of life, what your purpose is. And I suspect, as others have observed, there's going to be a lot of public service involved in whatever you're doing in the future. It's been great working with you, even though we're always at opposite ends of the dais and I have to wave at you. We can't whisper anything. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Rickman?
Thank you, Chair. No, it's a pleasure to get to know you. Thank you for your service, and happy retirement again. And, being one of 3 retired law enforcement on this board, it was nice to chat with you about, stuff offline also. So enjoy your retirement, and God bless.
So you get the last word before I take you down there to present you a little going away present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've never been a person who was comfortable being praised, so I do appreciate your words. First, I'd like to thank the staff for the last 6 years. I have to say that when I think of how I would want public employees to work together. This is an example. The employees always step up. They're professional, cordial, and I think that, which is unusual, because sometimes you have people who deal with the public who don't treat the public in the manner in which they should be treated. And one of the things that having worked for 8 different cities and entities, you find out how your employees treat the public by how their leadership treats them. And so I'm very proud to know that this leadership treats their employees right, and that equates to them treating the public correctly, which you don't always see. I'd like to thank my fellow board members now and in the past. I came in not knowing a lot about the public health mission of the agency, and I learned a lot. An agency like this is a little different than most governmental agencies. You're a public health agency, but you're also an advocate for the growers, the industry, our farmers, our small communities, the disadvantaged communities, for environmental advocates. And you also push legislation through, advocate for legislation, and also try to mitigate or go against some legislation that frankly doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. The culture here is something that I think other agencies could certainly learn from, and it's important. In the future, and now I'm still on the Clovis City Council, will be until 2026 when I run for re-election. I teach at the police academy. I have other things that I do, but this is going to leave a hole in my schedule, and I'm going to need to find a place to fill that. One of the concerns I have in the future, and this agency will play a big role, and so will this board, is there are times when we get legislation or regulations from above us that either, one, don't make sense, two, are so unwieldy that they're going to cause even more harm, where you're going to take out specific, we may have people who say, I don't want to grow anymore. But who's going to grow the food? Where's that going to come from? And we need to be, as citizens, need to be engaged enough to question the validity or the sense of these things. I mean, we're looking at 2035, no gas cars being sold. Well, we just saw that the Teslas are freezing in the Midwest. You have mandates that come from our friends at CARB and from EPA that all these, all our transit vehicles after 2029 have to be electric. Without the charging infrastructure, without the training for people to fix them, they cost more, and we have to buy more because the range isn't there. And I think that this board and the future boards and this organization has to say, hold on, and at least be the voice of reason. So one, either they can change it, mitigate it, or they can never say, we didn't know. And that's really important for us to do that. It has been my pleasure to be on this board. I hope that when we bump into each other at Costco or wherever, or League of Cities, or any number of places, we can sit down and have a chat. It's important when you leave a board, when you leave a job, that you don't show up for a little while, because how can we miss you if you never leave? So I will be connected, but in a very esoteric way. So I appreciate your words, and I will miss the board. I'll even miss as someone who's worked for 5 cities. The public comments here are nice folks. I haven't had anybody ever stand at public comments and make an overly negative, nasty comment, which is becoming unusual in public service. And that speaks to the professionalism of this organization and this board. So thank you so much. I will miss being here.
We're going to go down and take a picture, but that is the essence of why we're going to miss him right there. That was perfect words. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just one thing really quickly. Technically, it's not my last meeting. On the 31st of this month, I will be chairing the meeting where my replacement is going to be appointed. So it's kind of like being part of a committee to pick your ex-wife's next husband.
I'm going to write that one down. That was a good one. I don't even know what to say.
Buddy might want to be a part of that. He's concerned about
Okay, we're going to move on to item 4, and there's a little hitch in item 4. This is the approval of the consent calendar, the items 15 through 23, but I'm going to turn it over to our attorney.
Thank you. Yes, just very quickly, items 18 and 19 are recommendations for final action on salary adjustments made to the employment contracts of the APCO and the district council in the amount of 2.5%. And this amount is consistent with the salary increases received by all district employees in the effective MOU. And with that, you can move forward and take action.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to, are there any questions? Does anyone want to pull any items? No. Okay, any public comment?
Are there any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to comment on consent calendar?
No members of the public in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Modesto that would like to comment on the consent calendar?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none and none online.
Okay, thank you. Back to the board for action.
Motion to approve.
With motion
Second.
and a second.
Also through the chair, for the record, Mr. Preciado has joined the meeting. Okay, Mr. Bessinger,
Yes.
Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Preciado,
Yes.
Mr. Reyna,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Shuklian,
Aye.
Mr. Chiesa.
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Perfect, thank you. On to item 5, which is a public comment period. Time is made available for comments from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction. Agenda items 7 through 9 will each have an individual public comment period, and it is requested that comments on these items be made at that time. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment?
Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. In Modesto, do you have any members of the public?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? Seeing none in person, we do have one online, Connie Young.
Hey, good morning, Connie.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can.
So, this is Connie Young, Fresno resident, et cetera, et cetera. I clearly got mixed up and I gave my comment that was intended for this meeting at the previous meeting, which, by the way, I didn't see posted online with the agenda. But unless you need me to read it again, I will spare you that if it would be possible to include my comment from the previous meeting in today's minutes.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie.
No further online comments.
Okay. So on to item 6, the STAR recognition, service, teamwork, attitude, and respect. Shaniqua, be leading. I see lots of bright shining faces in here. I love it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome. So today we are going to be recognizing some of our staff who have reached their service milestones for the last quarter of 2023. So I'm glad to be here today. As you're aware, recognition of employees' contributions are an essential component to the district's STAR culture. So again, we're going to be recognizing those employees who've reached their service milestones. If they are present, we'd ask that they stand and remain standing until all names have been read today. So we appreciate all of your contributions. Thank you so much for your service and your commitment to the district over the years. Today, we have individuals in Fresno and Bakersfield that will be recognized. So we'll start in Bakersfield. Bakersfield, you can just, Ruben. All right, here we go. So for 5 years of service, we will be recognizing Dylan Bourne, Air Quality Inspector. And for 15 years of service, Ruben Ibarra, Air Quality Field Assistant. Moving back to Fresno, 5 years of service, Carlos Hernandez Ortiz, Senior Programmer Analyst. Michelle Ortiz, Senior Air Quality Specialist. Zhang Zhang, Air Quality Education Representative. Being recognized for 10 years of service, Eric McLaughlin, Air Quality Specialist. And for 15 years of service, Eden Estrada, Air Quality Specialist. Carol Flores, Air Quality Specialist. Christy Sharp, Air Quality Specialist. Tim Van Dyne, Senior Network Systems Analyst. Security Analyst, sorry. And for 25 years of service, recognizing Chai Tao, Program Manager. Congratulations to you all, and thank you for your contribution.
This is exactly what Member Bessinger was talking about. Great staff and make us look good and do great work on behalf of the constituents of the Valley. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shaniqua. Okay, on to item 7, receive and file the annual comprehensive financial report and single audit report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. Was looking at each other.
Sorry, we're just going to introduce and quickly turn it over to Ryan Buchanan, the Director of Administrative Services here, to walk us through this item.
Right, perfect. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. So I'm here to report to you with the district's annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year 22-23. These financial reports are prepared by our finance team each year, and the district is currently in an agreement with Price Page and Company to provide an annual audit, working hard with us throughout the year to look at our financial reports and report back to you, the board. The district prepares the annual comprehensive financial report, also known as the ACFR, as well as a single audit report where all federal funded grants are included, and those audits are conducted in accordance with the Single Audit Act of 1984. Price Page has completed the audit report for all district financial statements and concluded that these reports present all material respects with no findings. In other words, a clean audit a clean audit report, excuse me. In addition, Price Page has noted that the district has no instance of non-compliance under governmental auditing standards. And I'm happy to have here sitting next to me, Mr. Fausto Hinojosa, joining us from Price Page. Mr. Hinojosa is the managing partner and head of all audits and forensic consulting engagements for the firm. I'd like to thank Mr. Hinojosa and his wonderful team from Price Page that worked to complete these audits over the past few years, and especially the last year. And in that, I'd like to turn it over to him for a brief presentation on the audit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to come and share the results of the audit with you, as we've done in prior years. I've got a brief PowerPoint presentation just to keep me on track here and make sure that my comments are not too long, because I know you have other important business to attend to. So I'm going to just, my agenda here for this morning is briefly describe the firm, so that you know who is performing the work, some of which has already been shared. Our audit process, which I believe is really the most important area, along with the audit area of emphasis, which account balances and areas of your financial statements were we most focused in. We've already shared a little bit about the auditor's reports, but I'm going to cover that very briefly again. There are some required communications that generally accepted auditing standards require that we share with you, and so we'll do that, and if there are any questions for me. So we are located in Clovis. We have about 60 people there in Clovis, near Clovis Community Hospital. Our specialization on the audit side is municipal, county, and special district audits, along with a number of nonprofit organizations, all of I think you would recognize here, and primarily in the Fresno County area. So moving forward here, I've already been introduced to the managing and engagement partner here. Jasmine Logie is joining me, and she really is the one that did and does all of the heavy lifting, right? I'm the one that gets to come up here and share the results, but the audit work was done primarily by Ms. Logie. She was our in-charge auditor and had some staff that assisted her on the engagement. So audit process, our job as auditors is to assess risks of error and fraud. And the way that we do that is by obtaining an understanding of the organization, not just the financial part, but other operational parts, because they might have an impact on finances. And so we do that in our planning process. And a part of that planning process is to make inquiries about fraud and other risks. But we also obtain an understanding of the internal control of the organization. That's a critical key component. And when we say obtain an understanding of internal control, we're taking a look at your policies and procedures with respect to internal controls. And number one, determining whether they are effectively designed. If right out of the gate, we know that there's a policy or procedure with internal control that's not effectively designed, we don't need to go test it. It's already not working. That's going to create significant risks. And then we're going to perform audit procedures to see if anything went wrong. Now, if the control is effectively designed, you have a great policy. I'll use an example. There's a policy maybe that every check over $20,000 requires 2 signatures, as an example. Well, that's a great policy, but is that what is actually happening? So from an audit perspective, then we do the second part, is that control placed in operation? Once we assess that, then we devise audit procedures again to determine whether anything is going wrong. And again, focused on errors and fraud. So the areas of emphasis in your financial statements that we were most focused on, we didn't just focus in these areas, but these are the areas that were emphasized. Cash and investments, certainly, and you'd understand why that is. Your revenues and receivables. The issue with revenues and receivables isn't so much that a revenue comes in and doesn't make it to the bank. The issue really has to do with governmental accounting standards that have some complexity as to when a revenue is recognized, if it's deferred, if there's an accounts receivable. And because of that complexity, and with our experience in performing audits of other governmental agencies, we find errors in that area. And so that's an area that we focus on here in your audit. Expenditures and accounts payable, the net pension liability, which is obviously a big number. And so we spend some time there. There's a significant footnote in the financial statements might go for several pages that describes that net pension liability. And then because you receive federal funding, your audit is performed also not just in accordance with the auditing standards that are promulgated by the American Institute of CPAs, but also auditing standards that come in the uniform guidance by the federal government. And because you receive those federal grants, we're required to perform a compliance audit. So we do an audit of the financial statements. Separately, we do a compliance audit that's different from the financial statement audit to determine whether you've complied in all material respects with those federal grants. So the auditor's report on the financial statements has been shared by Mr. Buchanan, an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. I've already shared that audit is performed in accordance with AICPA and government auditing standards. And the opinion says financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with the rules. That's what an audit report does. An audit report doesn't say, oh, you're in great financial condition, you're in poor financial condition. An audit report says the financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with the rules. There's a separate report, Government Auditing Standards Report. In that report, we're required to identify and report to you any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control. As has been shared, but I'll share with you, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses were identified in our audit procedures related to those controls. Also, for compliance, we're required to report to you whether we identified any material non-compliance. Now, we're not attorneys, and so we can't give any kind of legal opinion, but if there are laws or regulations that might impact the financial statements, let's say a grant award, for example, and you didn't comply, then we would be required to report that to you. So it's a narrow focus. However, if we identify non-compliance that might have an impact on the financial statements, we have an obligation to report that, but there were no deficiencies identified in that area either. $23 million, $23.5 million is the total amount of your federal expenditures, not receipts, but expenditures. And you have an unmodified opinion there as well. So you had the opinion on the financial statements, and you also have a clean opinion on compliance. And with respect to those federal grants, no deficiencies noted with respect to compliance. So overall, an outstanding job on your audit. These are the required communications. Significant accounting policies. There were no changes with respect to significant accounting policies. The significant estimates in the financial statements are the net pension liability and the related deferrals. All that means is that pension liability number, that's not a hard number. The money that's in the bank, we know how much is in the bank. With respect to this liability, that's an estimate prepared by actuaries. And as you know, you're a part of the Fresno County Employee Retirement Association, or is it Kern County? Forgive me. Yeah, I do a few of these. There's an estimate that's prepared by the actuaries, and then this on your financial statements is your share of that big liability. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We had no difficulties. One of the critical things for us as auditors is if we're making inquiries and requesting documents, and if there is either delay or if we sense that our inquiries are not being responded to, right? We're not experts. I'm not an FBI agent, but if we just kind of start to sense that there's some hesitation there, then that would concern us. And so that could be an area where we'd have some difficulty in the audit, but pleased to report that is not the case here. All of our inquiries were responded to, documents were provided, access was provided to any documents that we needed. No significant audit adjustments. No disagreements with management about accounting principles or the preparation of the financial statements. No fraud or illegal acts identified in our audit. Now, the significant risks identified. This is kind of a new thing. This, I think, last year was the first year. We're required to let you know what we consider significant risks. Not that we identified something there, but in an audit now, the auditing standards require that we identify the significant risks and that we inform you of what those risks are. So management override of controls. You could have a good internal control process and system, but management, because of their position, can override those controls. We're aware of that, and we perform procedures to determine whether that's occurred. I've already shared that there were no findings. The improper revenue recognition due to fraud, I've already described. And then in this year, there was a new accounting pronouncement. Anytime there's a new accounting pronouncement, we focus in that area because there can be some complexity there. Your team does an outstanding job with respect to financial reporting, and so nothing was identified in that area. Good, I'm through. That's what I have to share, and I'm glad to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Any questions?
Just got a comment.
Okay.
I just want to say, I've been very familiar with your firm for many, many years, even before you started working
I think
there.
so.
But you are the gold standard in auditing. Your team represents the highest standards. To get an audit from a firm, to get it from, Price Page is the ultimate. I just want to thank you for all the work you've done for us.
Thank you, Supervisor. I appreciate that. It's really our team that does the work, so thank you.
Yeah.
He did say Jasmine. Raise your hand again. Thank you. And you're the gold standard to check our work. And Ryan and your team, please give more regards. Again, clean audits are always good, right? When you're in government, and this is about as complex of an organization with federal funding, state funding, the different types. So good to see we're in compliance. Any other questions from the board? Nope. We're going to go out to the public for public comment.
Are there any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to comment on this item?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. In Modesto, do you have any members of the public that would like to comment?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none and no online comments.
Perfect. Thank you. This is not an action item, so we just received the report. Appreciate everything
you
you've
all.
done.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to move on to item number 8, receive an update on the district's agricultural open burn phase out strategy and approve enhancements to the Ag Burn Alternatives Grant Program, including allocation of additional funds. John and Todd will be presenting.
All right, thank you, Chair, members of the board. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, joined by Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives. And I'll go ahead and kick off this presentation this morning with a little bit of background on ag open burning. As you know, the Valley has the toughest restrictions on ag burning in the state. We are the only region that has a phase out strategy that's been implemented over the years. And this started in 2005 as we started phasing out different crops over time. And this effort has significantly reduced open ag burning over the years. And this is enforced through our local District Rule 4103 that we have on the books. We've continued to prioritize over time with your board's direction, different alternatives that could be used as instead of open ag burning, what else can we do to take care of the material? And we appreciate that support. And this also included the final phase out strategy that I'll highlight here in just a moment. So just going back in time a few years, back in June 2021, your board adopted and CARB approved the final phase out over the last few years for the remaining crops that were still exempt from this. The final phase out set a date of January 1st, 2025 for the near complete phase out of all open ag burning in the Valley. So that's less than a year away now at this point. So we're getting close to that date. The phase out schedule that we came up with a number of years ago, we set it up to try to maximize the amount of tonnage of material that won't be burned as we go through this process, but also taking into account feasibility and alternatives, different crop types, trying to give the smallest ag operations the most time with this and the most flexibility to adjust to this phase out. And this also came along with significant incentives to assist growers to do these alternatives to bear the cost as we get closer to this phase out date. We're currently in the process of implementing this. As I mentioned, we're in the last year now of this process. And there's been a lot of outreach over the years to Valley growers about the phase out requirements over these last few years and available resources through our incentive program. And just kind of highlighting here the progress we've been making over the last few years. We've looked at this last year as well at our update, but highlighting now what's happened in 2023, just going back in time. We used to have about 1 million tons of ag material open burned in the Valley each year. In 2021, when we first started to implement our phase out strategy, that number dropped dramatically to about 480,000 tons of material. And then 2022, about 125,000 tons of material. And again, in 2023, there's a new record low of just below that at 122,000 tons of material open burn. So compared to where we were at 1 million tons a few years ago to where we are now, just about above 100,000, it's really great to see that reduction. The big part of this reduction too is from our Ag Burn Alternatives Grant Program, which over the last couple of years, over 2 million tons of ag material has been processed through that alternatives program, which has really helped drive down some of these open ag burning tons we've seen the past few years. And we expect these numbers, that the amount of tons being open burned, to continue to decrease this year in 2024 as we get closer to that January 1st, 2025 phase out date. So just visually showing here what I just mentioned on the previous slide. This shows in this bar chart, a couple of bar charts, the progress we're seeing. So the chart on the left is the number of tons that have been open burned annually each year across different crop types. And if you look at that blue box highlighted on the right side there of that first chart, you can see when we first launched our grants program, when our phase out strategy was implemented, you see those totals come down dramatically, and you see these last couple of years very low compared to what we've seen previously. And then in support of that, on the right-hand side of this slide here, you see the amount of material going through our grants program. So you see that ramping up at the same time as our tonnage of being open burned is ramping down. You can see the connection between the two, how our grants program is really helping support this. And just noting here, there are a few remaining crops that will be phased out on January 1st, 2025, vineyard removals, orchard removals less than 15 acres in size, and surface harvested prunings. These are the last three on our phase out schedule that will be phased out here by the end of this year. And through all of this work, public engagement is really key for us. And this is especially important as the Valley Ag community faces a number of challenges as we get closer to this final phase out date. As we know, in previous years, extreme drought conditions caused new water requirements under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that the ag community is having to implement and satisfy. The loss of historical alternatives like the biomass plants have shut down in the recent years, and changing crop economics. The price for different crops have hit record lows in some areas, and that could bring on the need for people to pull out orchards or vineyards earlier than they were expecting to. And we'll keep track of all these issues and keep looking for opportunities to support alternatives to support the ag community. And this will take a lot of coordination, communication with the ag community and community-based organizations who may have a stronger tie to some of the smaller farming operations. We really want them to understand in this last year what opportunities they have to get involved in the incentive program to help support them before this final phase-out date goes into effect by the end of this year. So at this point, I'll pass it over to Todd to give us some more background on the incentive program and some recommendations.
Thank you, John. So to support the phase out that John just described of ag burning and the need for these new alternatives here in the Valley, back in 2018, as a pilot program, your board authorized the development of the new Ag Burn Alternatives Grant Program. The program provides financial incentives to growers to chip ag material for soil incorporation, land application, and what we call off-site beneficial reuse, which I'll describe in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. During that pilot program phase, over $25 million in local funding was invested to support these new emerging alternatives. And in 2021, through strong advocacy from your board, the agricultural industry, as well as really a testament to how well the program was running, the district received $178 million in state funding to expand fleet capacity and then really support the deployment of these new alternative practices here in the Valley. The board approved enhancements at the time, really focused on ensuring that smaller ag operations have equitable access to the funding. And I'll describe the specific measures that we've included over the years in later slides. So we received this grant in mid-August of 2021, and then 2 weeks later, we opened this new expanded program on September 1st, utilizing this newly available state funding. Again, there was an additional program focus on assisting these small growers that have unique economic challenges as these new alternatives are being implemented. This program has been critical to supporting the transition to these new alternatives, the development of these new alternatives, as well as the availability of chipping equipment. We need to have the available chipping equipment out there to support these new alternatives. So a portion of this state grant went towards the expansion of fleets and the addition of new chipping equipment. Since the inception of the program, we've supported these alternative practices, which represents more than 226,000 acres of orchard and vineyard removals, and 6.2 million tons of agricultural materials that would have been burned that went through these alternative practices. This resulted in the reduction of over 12,000 tons of NOx, 22,000 tons of PM, and more than 19,000 tons of VOCs. Since we reopened the program in September of 2021, more than $160 million in funding has been provided to support these new alternatives throughout the valley. So this slide just goes to show of that amount, the two different categories. Like I mentioned, we had funding that was set aside by your board to support the expansion of the chipping fleets and the chipping contractors here in the valley. $30 million was made available. Majority of that has been spent to date, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail in an upcoming slide. And then the remainder of that has been used for alternative practices. That bottom right-hand corner is key to the ongoing discussion, which I'll come back to in a couple of slides. We have about $7.6 million left, but of that amount, we actually have of applications representing about $3.5 million in-house that we're currently working on. And as of last week when this was published, that was the number. It's probably less than that now because we've been executing contracts and moving projects forward. So it's probably about $1 million less than that as of today. And so here's the participation by crop type. Overwhelmingly, almond orchard removals have made up a majority of the participation in the program, followed by grapes and walnuts, and then it drops off significantly from there. But this just is a graphic representation of the participation by crop type. And then what are folks doing? What sort of practices are they implementing through the program? Overwhelmingly, it's been soil incorporation. About 92% of all of the projects are soil incorporation. This is chipping and shredding of this material and then having it reincorporated on site into the fields. Next is this off-site beneficial reuse. This is a relatively new concept in the program as of a couple of years ago. And this includes innovative new ways to dispose of this material. It could be used for, there's a couple of examples on the slide, calf bedding, dust suppression along roads, along highways, along, both on and off the field. And there's just a variety of different strategies that growers are coming up with to dispose of this material in cases where they can't or don't want to incorporate it into the soil. So as I mentioned, dedicated funding for smaller agricultural operations and supporting these smaller ag operations has been critical, and it's been something your board has consistently prioritized. So since December of 2020, your board has directed 30% of the available funding to be set aside for smaller agricultural operations. And at the time, this was defined as agricultural operations 500 acres or less in size. And as you can see, we've hit that target, actually exceeded it somewhat. And to date, 31% of the funding has gone to those smaller ag operations that are less than or equal to that 500 acres. In August of 2021, to further support small growers, your board allocated an additional $100 per acre for each funding category for the smallest of agricultural operations, those ag operations less than 100 acres in size. And in February 2023, your board actually increased that amount, given the unique economic challenges of these smaller growers and the experience we've had over the past several years. Your board increased that amount to $400 per acre, again, for those very smallest growers, those growers that are 100 acres or less in size. And as you can see, over the past several years, those projects, those growers 100 acres or less in size have represented 24% of the total projects, not necessarily the total funding, but 24% of the total projects in the valley. And they represent about 13% of the total funding in the program over the past several years. So as I mentioned, fleet expansion and having the capacity and the availability of this equipment out there to support this phase out and to support the chipping of this material is critical. And so $30 million of that new state funding was allocated towards new chipping and grinding equipment purchases within the program. Since September of 2021, we've seen significant interest. 55 pieces of grinding and chipping equipment have been purchased. A vast majority of those have been implemented and are currently serving the valley's growers to implement these alternative practices. So because of the phase out, we are forecasting the expenditure rate to continue to increase over the next year. With existing funding, you remember we had about $7.2 million from that previous slide. We're estimating at this point that that funding will be exhausted in the next several weeks, probably by the end of January, perhaps the first week of February. So within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're anticipating that funding will be exhausted. Without action, that would mean that the district would have to stop accepting new applications at that point. And so to continue to support the phase out through the 2024 calendar year and to hit that final phase out date of 1/1/25, significant additional funding would be needed to support that final phase out. And so we've been very active in trying to come up with strategies to bring additional funding to the program. And we've been working with the California Air Resources Board to get our program included into the Community Air Protection Program guidelines, the CAP program. Those are the AB 617 program funds that are available valley-wide. These are not the CERP funds. These are not the community funds. These are the valley-wide funds that are available under the CAP program guidelines. And we're working right now to get our program included in those guidelines. And what that would do is that would provide us the ability to use those CAP funds for our program, providing that additional funding opportunity. We're working closely with CARB at this point. Unfortunately, the guidelines are not expected to be complete until April of this year. So we've got this funding gap. We've got this timing gap. And so additional short-term funding and some programmatic changes we believe are necessary to ensure the program continuity and funding availability between when we think we're going to run out of funding at the end of January or early February, and then the availability of those CAP funds in April. So we think there's that funding gap, and we have a couple of strategies we feel like we can bridge that gap. And so two of them are proposed funding allocations. The first one is to temporarily reallocate $10 million in local district funding from our suite of agricultural programs, from the Low Dust Harvester program temporarily to the Ag Burn Alternatives program. The current spending plan for the Low Dust Harvester program includes $25 million in funding for the remainder of this fiscal year. And given where we are in implementing that funding, we believe that a shift of $10 million, leaving that $15 million available for the program, we believe that's sufficient to get us from now until the end of the fiscal year in June. Should that not be the case, and should we need additional funding in the Low Dust Harvester program, one of the other things that we're doing is working with CARB to actually get the Low Dust Harvester program also included in the CAP guidelines. And so if we're successful, and we've been working with CARB, and you know, we've seen drafts, and so it's moving forward. And so if we needed to, we would have the ability to come back around the April timeframe and then provide a recommendation for additional funding in the Low Dust Nut Harvester program. So we would be able to fund that, again, utilizing those available valley-wide CAP funds. So the second funding allocation recommendation for you today is once those guidelines are approved in April and we have the ability to use those CAP funds, those statewide CAP funds, would be to allocate up to $20 million in additional CAP funds for the remainder of this fiscal year. So the first recommendation will get us to April. The second recommendation then gets us from April until the end of the fiscal year in June. And then additional funding beyond that would be supported in the spending plan that's available in the next fiscal year's budget. So in addition to the proposed funding recommendations, we also have a recommendation related to participation caps. In February of 2023, just about a year ago, your board updated the program to institute a cap of 500 acres per year per entity. This means that any entity in the valley can get funding for practices for up to 500 acres of material. And this was done to, again, stretch the available dollars and ensure that we have access to the maximum number of growers in the valley. So to further that point and ensure that we have continued cost-effective and broad program access, again, particularly with a focus on those small growers and making sure that we're stretching those available dollars, Right now, we're proposing a recommendation to lower that cap from 500 acres per entity per year down to 250 acres per entity per year. And we've done an analysis, and while this reflects a 50% reduction in acreage limits in the program, it really only impacted about 10% of the projects over the past 12 months or so. But it did actually significantly extend the reach of the program, given those 10% of the growers that would have exceeded that cap. It provided about it would have provided about a $6 million increase or an extension of funding, given what we saw over the last year. If we had instituted that cap, it represents about additional $6 million of funding. And so, if approved today, we would apply this new entity cap to anyone submitting a program application basically as of tomorrow. And so where do we go from here? As John talked about a little bit earlier, we're going to continue looking at new innovative alternative strategies. We understand that this is not the only regulation, this is not the only issue facing the ag industry at this point. As some of the things John talked about, pervasive drought conditions, the SGMA regulation, the loss of alternatives that John talked about, including biomass plants, along with other industry impacts. We can't look at this in a silo, and we understand that this is just one of the issues that ag is dealing with. So we understand that, and we're sensitive certainly to that fact. We'll continue to monitor the grant program participation levels to make sure that we're remaining responsive to Valley ag operations. Particularly, again, those smaller growers as they face those unique difficulties in implementing these final phase-out strategies. We'll continue to engage with the Valley Ag organizations and community-based organizations on outreach efforts that really seek opportunities to find those smaller growers and to make sure that they understand that they have access to these available funds. And then, most importantly, we're going to continue to advocate for additional state and federal funding to support the transition away from open burning here in the Valley, including working with stakeholders to include a funding ask in the 2024-25 state budget. That's already in the works. And then working with stakeholders and our partners at the USDA NRCS to see if there's new opportunities for this type of funding within their available programs. So there's a lot going on there as we sort of implement these final phase-out strategies. There's recommendations in your board packet, and with that, I will bring it back to your board.
So Todd, on the cap funds, how much money is not being utilized? Or how much money is in the pot? And does that have to be legislatively refilled every year?
So at this point, we've got about $60 million of our most recent award that is sort of unprogrammed at this point. Okay. We just received this money, and we're going to program some of it through the upcoming budget process. But as of right now, we have about that available amount that's unprogrammed at this point. And it would require no legislative action. Once the cap guidelines are approved in April, we would have access to those funds for this program.
Excellent. Okay. Member Bessinger.
Thank you, Chair. It was an excellent report. This is one of the most visible programs that we do. It benefits not only the rural areas, but specifically, at least for those of us representing cities, the metropolitan areas. I was able to go to a chipping operation at Shepherd and Temperance in Clovis. They took out, I think, 30 acres of walnuts. And that would have been burned years ago, which would have, it's a fairly, a lot of ag land and larger homes. It would have affected that area. But when Fresno State took out a bunch of their orchards along Bullard and 168, there were piles that they chipped that looked like they were 50 feet high, and numerous piles. And if they had burned that, if it went to the south, it would have hit all the students at Fresno State. And if it went to the north, it would have hit my grandchildren's school. So this is a very important program for the metropolitan areas specifically, just because whenever it burns, it's going to affect good folks. And especially in some of the rural communities when you have orchards that are being removed on the outskirts of towns, that air is going to go into the towns, and especially when you have towns that are struggling economically, they're not going to have the filters, even though we do a good job with that too. So I'm really in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lewis?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions for my clarification, since I wasn't on the board back in 2005. On the graph on page 5, it shows the tonnage amount from the wood waste burning starting in the year 2000, but from 2005, there started to be a decline in what appears to be the pollutants that were sent out, and then after 2013, 14, it went back up again. What was the cause for that decline?
Yeah, maybe I can weigh in on that. Having been involved in this journey for quite a long time now, but so Todd and John kind of hit on this point. That was when you really started to see the bigger and ongoing shutdown of the biomass plants that were the primary outlet for the orchard removals. And so you saw, and so you'll notice on the graph there, the yellow portion going back up, which are the removal of almond and other orchards. Basically, that outlet was eliminated in big parts of the valley, and so you saw a giant ramp up. And right at the peak of that, and the board took a lot of action at that time to really think about how there was a summit and the pilot program launched to see, well, okay, what else could we be doing with this material? And that's where the soil incorporation, there was some great research that was done, there's partnerships that were built, and that right around that peak of that yellow kind of going up is where you started to see the pilot program and the alternatives, and then obviously the launch of the phase out strategy and the new program that turned that back around. And so there's a lot of soil incorporation now going on that at that time was not a viable option. And that's why you saw that ramp up.
All right, thank you. And then for the methods of material that will be used for other options like calf bedding and dust suppression, is this all of the materials that are combined together, or is it only certain types of materials that are going to be used?
These are project specific. So if a grower comes to us and say they're taking out an almond orchard, they would utilize the specific chipped material from that almond orchard in one of these alternative methods. So these are not brought to some sort of central location and then something's done with them. It's really on a project by project basis that these alternative practices are being implemented.
So there may be some biomaterial that's not used that has to be disposed of in another form.
Well, all of the material from a particular project has to be disposed of in one of the approved methods. Okay. That could be a combination of things. It could be soil incorporation or land application or one of these alternative methods. But all of the material from the particular removal site has to be dealt with in some manner.
Okay. And then the last question I have is page 16, when we're looking at the $10 million of stopgap money from the local district funding. And then starting in April, if it lasts through that amount of time, there'll be another allocation. Is this going to be open to all farmers, and we'll be still paying attention to the small farmers to make sure that they get a fair share of this?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Member Robinson?
Oh, let's see, just a few questions. So on page 5, on the tons of ag waste, let's see, woody waste processed through alternatives, the 2023 figures were a little bit under 2022. Is that because we just haven't received the last information from 2023, or is that due to like a reduced in our funding efforts, or what is that attributed to?
Are you referring to the far right-hand side, the grant program
Far right-hand
totals?
side, yes.
Oh, treasure.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it's pretty close, but I think, are you asking about the slight, dip
Yeah, I mean,
that
we,
amount?
you know, we were on a
Yeah.
pretty good incline and then we had a very slight decrease. And I was just wondering, is that because maybe the December data is not in yet or?
No, I think that, I mean, every year to year, there's variation in what types of acres. So one other stat on here is how much money was, and how many acres were covered by the program. I think those are actually larger in 23 than 22. But when you look at the mix between whether it's an orchard versus like a vineyard, there's more wood, say, in an orchard versus a vineyard. So that ratio of what types of acres get removed, how many vineyards versus how many orchards, that has a big impact on the tons of wood. Doesn't necessarily mean that there were, you know, less or more acres removed. So, yeah, I would probably focus more on the fact that it's still a very large number.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that
yeah,
variation
absolutely.
year to year is
Okay.
probably what explains that.
All right. And then
Yeah,
I know
think
this is
that- and Todd's confirming what I was.
That's correct.
Yeah, there were more vineyards done.
Educated guess, but
in
yeah.
2023.
Yeah.
You're 100% correct.
Thank you.
And
there
then I know it's a small component, but can you define what an air curtain burner is?
Yeah, basically an air curtain burner is an efficient way to dispose of this material. And I don't know maybe somebody else has more specifics, but it's basically a unit that's brought out, and it's an efficient way to dispose of this agricultural material through burning that actually doesn't emit, you know, the smoke and the particulate matter. These are units that are brought out on site and then used to dispose of this material.
And then lastly, I know you guys were trying to determine the sweet spot, and I guess you got to 250 acres. If you were to even go to 200 acres, do you know how many more people does that touch?
What we've estimated is it may provide about another, or based on last year, it would have provided about an additional $1 million. So, you know, that reduction could have extended the program by a certain amount. You know, in addition to, you know, say going from 500 to 250, we get about 6 million. It's a little bit more than that. You know, about 20 to 25% more than that. So it extends that reach just, and in our burn rate, you know, maybe another couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
All right, thank you so much. And just, I just want to start off by thanking everybody that's worked on this. I mean, the skeptics will, you know, somewhere out there say it couldn't be done, but you know, it's getting done, and I know that it's taken so many people to get here, and such hard work on grants and incentives. You know, all of you getting it done, and the advocacy at the state level. Samir, Tom, you know, our industry folks, and CARB as well, to being a champion to make sure this was a success. So thank you all, and the board members that have been engaged in the process too. You know, I think right now for me, I'm really looking, you know, forward and sort of beyond, and the recognition that we are in the hardest year and the hardest part. And the money is not getting more, it's easier to get, it's, you know, I appreciate all the creativity and all the pushing on the guidelines. I think that that's really helpful. And I think that this is a really good use of the community's money because it does impact communities. So I agree with that use. I think I have a couple of questions and just kind of things to also think about as we move forward. So I know in the past we've used that figure 1, that slide 5 that the supervisor was asking about, to kind of guide us as a way to ensure that that the burns were not happening illegally and that the waste material was being used. So we're kind of using that as a guide to see how, you know, that making sure that the alternatives were being used. And now that the crop size, or, you know, the waste amount is changing, I just wanted to learn a little bit more sort of going forward. What kind of things are you going to be looking for as guides that when people are needing to dispose, that the materials are being used in the way, you know, that the burning isn't happening, or that the alternatives are being used. You know, how will we check that on a regional front?
Yeah, and I think I can try to take that. It's a great question. So as you all know, we didn't really focus a lot of the presentation on the enforcement program that goes along with the phase outs and the long-standing presence that we've had in regulating this whole category through the smoke management system, the inspections that we conduct. Obviously, a smoke plume would be one of the first and obvious. You know, these are actually as we continue educating the public and the ag community, and this is actually entrenched and becoming even more entrenched part of the valley. You know, the fabric of the valley. This phase out is a very, as you said, very visible, very something not only visible to ag, but also has been visible in the past. In the past, when there was a lot more burning going on, we get a lot of calls about those burns, and sometimes they were legal burns, sometimes they were not. And of course, we take the appropriate enforcement action when, you know, somebody was burning illegally. Well, that's over time. You've already seen a substantial reduction, 90% reduction, even greater than 90% relative to prior years. It's going to be very, very difficult for somebody to conduct a burn without that being, you know, we're out in the field every day conducting inspections on the farms. We're going to likely hear about any illegal burning that's going on. We're going to continue to conduct proactive inspections as part of the enforcement program. We actually are out in rural communities. We're regularly out there, so of course we'll be keeping a lookout for that. I do think that this grant program, along with the NRCS program and others, will continue. I think there's going to be ongoing. It's going to be a high touch program with the ag community, with not only small farmers but even the medium sized and large farmers. I don't think that are working with them on deploying the alternatives, offsite beneficial reuse. We're actually going to. One of the other things we didn't mention was composting is becoming another large alternative to the use of this material. And of course, with composting, there's a lot of record keeping and a lot of data that is available as to, you know, where that material is coming from. There's 1383, you know, other facets of waste diversion that get. So I do think that over time, there's going to be a lot of data sources for looking at how these different organic materials are being, you know, handled. You know, so I think between the tough enforcement program and the grant program that will still be in place between us and RCS, you know, I think a lot of data there, along with seeing the new alternatives, you know, whether it's road dust suppression, whether it's composting or other things, we'll certainly see. And bioenergy is the other area where, even though the biomass plants have been shutting down, you're seeing more and more interest in there being kind of the next generation of whether it's electricity, whether it's other fuels. Those obviously will also have a lot of record keeping, a lot of visible ways of seeing, you know, what exactly is happening to those woody materials going. So I think we'll have to keep looking at this holistically, regionally, and make sure, you know, that we're not seeing.
We'll expand the graph next year. Of all the other things. Yeah, especially because, I mean, like when we're talking about, you know, we're getting, you know, lower and lower, you know, I mean, just on a personal level, yeah, I still see plumes of ag burning, but they're really small. And so for someone like me that knows the phase out, it's like, okay, well, that's probably not, you know, but now, you know, that becomes harder to just distinguish. So, you know, any plume, call it in, you know, is that what we're telling the public, or are we just, you know, I appreciate having the more comprehensive strategy of how we're going to look at this holistically, in terms of seeing the progress. And then in terms of the, just kind of digging deeper into the enforcement, I think when thinking about, the vineyards, but also just as we sort of, you know, scale down the accessibility of our programs, our grant programs, you know, how are we thinking about enforcement differently for the bigger operations that have maybe had time or will have, you know, more direct access versus the small ones? I mean, are we thinking about that distinction as we're moving forward on the enforcement front?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a critical factor in how enforcement is viewed upon, means and other how long prohibition's been in place. There's different factors that go into that, and so I think that can be addressed in that process. So that yes, I think the short answer is yes. I think that's
And would it be addressed at the discretion of how you guys operate now,
Yes.
or okay? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Pereira?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I one, appreciate the effort and of this of staff with this program. I have a few, I don't know if they're concerns or questions, but I'll just share my thoughts and then we can go from there. So the first one is trying to get the biggest bang for our buck, and Supervisor Robinson, I think, mentioned it earlier, kind of questioning the size of the acres, dropping it down to 250, or if even lower might be more effective. So some of the things that I'm concerned about are that some of the smaller orchards, especially with the prices of almonds, are being actually just abandoned, right? So someone's just walking away from it. They quit managing it, they quit irrigating it, and so that brings up I think some dangers. One is actually forest fires. I mean, if you've got dead trees and you've got grass building up underneath them, and that grass lights, it may move fast, just like some of the forest fires have. And then the other unintended consequence of that is pest and disease that will build up in those abandoned orchards and spread to neighboring orchards. And so, anyways, I guess my question really is there a number smaller than 250, and that would maybe enhance this program and get multiple bangs for our buck, and so not only getting a reduced ag burning, but also reduce the risk of potential orchard fires down the road or disease to the neighbors.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond to that. Yeah, so I wanted to also first provide a little clarifying information to the question that Supervisor Robbins had, which is in line with your question to Supervisor Pereira, which is just looking at the data a little bit more after Todd responded. It's actually more significant of a reach in the program. If you were to lower it, say, to 200 acres, that's the number I'll focus on, just so we took a quick look at that. It's another 50% or so. So the Todd, basically talked about the 6 million reach. If you were to apply that formula, say, to last year's data, it would be another 3 million or so. If you were to, instead of using 250 acres, use 200 acres, it would be another 50% of that increase. So probably overall programmatically, you're talking about somewhere in like the 10 to 15% range at 250 acres of extra benefit. At 200 acres, it would be another 5 to 10% benefit. So you get it up to maybe a 25% or so total benefit. Just put it out there, make sure there's enough information to review this by. Obviously, that will vary depending on what actual removals occur, and this is more of a prediction based on last year. So there would be some extra benefit to that. That benefit would obviously grow if you were to keep ratchet down, below the 200 acres. I think the other thing I wanted to note is, as we watch this program over the course of this year, and we'll see what recommendations are actually acted upon today. There could be more recommendations down the line, and I think that's something that the comment was raised, I think actually by several board members, about the focus on small farmers. I think it's been mentioned, I think generally here across the board, consensus on the need to continue to support small farmers. So I think we're going to be looking very closely at that to see if mid-year this year, we need to also come back, especially if we're able to access some of these funds from NRCS or others. There's actually an EPA pot that we're also looking at right now. Those could come with even more recommendations on further focus on that. But that could be a combination of re-looking at the incentive amounts, look at them differently again between different size operations, lowering caps. There's a number of different things that we could be looking at. So I just wanted to note that that's something that we could take action on this today, or the board can take action on this today. But I do think that down the road, we'll have to keep looking at this. There's also just last piece I would say is that there's very complex dynamics in ag. You know, we keep learning over and over again how complex this really is. I know walnuts, for example, are particularly hit right now, and so we're actually going to have to continue reviewing, you know, if there's any other things that we need to look at in the context of what's actually happening on the ground. You know, those are the types of things that we want to review on an ongoing basis. But hopefully, sorry for taking a little bit there longer than maybe I needed to, perhaps, but just wanted to put all that information out there.
Okay, and then I have a couple other questions or points. One is that, you know, the larger farms tend to have staff members that are aware of our programs a little more than small farms. And so is it possible, or do we already do this, is if there are smaller orchards or vineyards that have been abandoned, is it possible for our staff to reach out to the property owners and kind of walk them through the process of trying to get it chipped or you know, some other process to get the trees out? And then the second point is, if we're going to work with NRCS, they have programs that allow people to plant native grasses. And so maybe take a look if there's some synergy between our program and that program, because I'm worried that, you know, we're going to have all this barren land, and then the dust is gonna be an issue going forward. So anyways, just to think of native grasses might be a way to kind of mitigate that dust down the road. Anyways, just two other thoughts that I have.
Just wanted to say yes to both of those points. And if anybody has ways of us to identify, you know, abandoned, we'll certainly look for those. But if there's if you ever see that happening or can connect us with anybody who may be able to alert us to that, we're happy to reach out. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Supervisor Pereira. Supervisor Mendez?
Yes, I actually have a lot of confidence in staff and on the staff recommendations, because I don't think the board really realizes, and I get this because I have people contact me that don't even live in my county and want me to fix a problem that they have when they're working with our staff. Now, the board here doesn't really see what you see every day, because we're trying to hit a moving target. This target's a moving target, and you're way better able to hit the sweet spot of where this moving target is than we are. I'm just saying from experience of working with you, because you guys are on the ball here. You guys run a great program. You understand the industry. And another thing we need that I don't know if the board understands, you have farmers that farm in multiple entities. So when you try to hit the sweet spot, that becomes a factor. Now, I don't quite fit into the small farming deal, but I actually have 3 different farming entities. I'm still small, but I know farming entities that have 50 sub-entities that are related to their deal. So we have to be careful which staff is on that, and they see a lot more of this because they see this stuff every day. They live it. So they're more capable of seeing this. Now, Mr. Pereira brought up a pretty important deal about abandonment. You know, and that's I know it becomes our problem when things get overgrown, and the fact that the valley is so vast, things that happen in the middle to the north of the valley don't exactly happen in the south part of the valley, just because the amount of rain we get every year, because it varies a lot between San Joaquin County and by the time you get to Kern County. So it's not, you know, everything just doesn't fit. You just can't say, we'll do this and it fits. But anyway, I just wanted to say that you guys do a remarkable job. And I know that from working with you on a lot of these items personally, not just from the board, exactly from the board area. So I just wanted to make that understood, and I want people to understand the whole concept of multiple entities and that you guys do balance that whole deal when you come up with this equation.
Thank you Supervisor Mendez. Dr. Sheriff.
Thank you, Vice Chair. What a topic. This is clearly generated from the board, some wonderful observations and suggestions and education for all of us about what's going on out there, the work we're doing, the work that the district does. A couple of observations, and it's great that it's generated so much discussion because this is such an important health issue, in fact. And it gets at important pollutants in a local issue and as well as regionally. So it's a real health win that we're working on this, and I appreciate very much Councilmember Bessinger's health comments. And you know, it's so much an economic win as we look at soil improvements and other things going on. One observation, we couldn't be doing this without the state money. That really has been a game changer in thinking about, well, why didn't we do this 10 years ago? What's the new technology that's allowing us to do this? Well, political will, the ability to help support the transition, and so much of that money comes from cap and trade, putting a price on carbon. Important to recognize the climate connection here. But it's really been key to finally making this transition that we've known for decades that we would have to make. An observation on the curtain burning, that it is so small, I think, is a testament both to industry and their adaptation and taking advantage of what we're offering, and changing habits. Also, the districts helping direct, right? There's not 10% curtain burning that we couldn't figure out how to manage burning that stuff. It's a fraction, and that's probably not going to go away, or it's going to decrease slowly because we do face things like disease as a reason to take out an orchard or a vineyard, and burning may be the only alternative sometimes. So it's great that that's such a small portion. I think, in fact, again, it's a testament to the industry. It's a testament to what the district has done to motivate accepting these other ways. The other thing, well, very important to highlight, and it goes along with that, there is no backsliding in this plan. Although we face new challenges, industry faces new challenges, as Supervisor Mendez pointed out, there's always a moving target. Despite that, no, we're not backsliding on this. We're going to make it work, which is key, and it's a testament to creative program adjustments that are represented here, based on a balance of experience, on need, on the benefits of this, and it's really wonderful work. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Sheriff. Supervisor McCauley.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Yeah, I really appreciate some of the comments around health issues and political will. And my comments are probably better reserved for our next item. But when I heard Dr. Pacheco-Warner talk about moving forward, more holistic approach, expanding the graph, those sort of things, I can't help but bring up that, you know, we're still burning up in the mountain communities. We have 50-foot tall piles burning right now around Bass Lake. Obviously that smoke drifts into our communities and our schools, just like Member Bessinger was referring to. So as we're moving forward, I just encourage staff to continue to think about that. When we're approaching NRCS, having those conversations, important to remember they recognize our forests as ag lands, right? And again, come back to the idea that what we're talking about here is public health and reducing the smoke. Certainly not advocating for, prohibiting pile burning up in the mountain areas. Obviously, I'm a big advocate for that, but I think there is a huge need to find alternative means of disposing of that woody debris that's up in the mountain areas. So I just want to make those comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And to Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I too respect, as Supervisor Mendez had mentioned, I too respect direction of staff. I am curious though, what do you do? How do you define a medium-sized farmer? How many acres would you define a medium-sized farmer?
I can kind of tell you, it's the terms can, I think vary significantly. There's like small and then smaller are two terms that have also come up in the past. So, currently, I can tell you that there are two main thresholds that are built into this program, and the other program that's really relevant. It's not so much on this specific issue, but within the ag world, the ag equipment replacement program also has some different provisions in there for different funding levels for equipment upgrades. So there's the smaller, and so basically you get about 50% for everybody kind of a thing, and then it goes up to 70% if your total farm size is below 500 acres, and then 85% if your total farm size is below 100 acres. So within this program as well, you've got there's a 100-acre threshold and with differences in incentives and 500 acres. So I think there's been general consensus amongst the board that below 100 acres is when you really get into the smallest operations, and then below 500 total acres. So again, it's not 500 per farm, and then you have 20 of those. It's 500 total acres of all the farmland. That's another key threshold. And then anything above that, so far, has just been considered bigger than that. So, I don't think we've talked about having a medium threshold per se, but those are the ones that have come up consistently in the past with kind of similar conversations.
Supervisor Shea.
Don't know if this is helpful or not, but in 2017, with the threat of the Asian citrus psyllid, Tulare County implemented an ordinance, and it was an abandoned orange orchard ordinance. And we'd go in and clear it. We give 60 days notice to the property owner, go in and clear it, and then lien the property. So just something to think about for the other counties and whatnot, if there are concerns about that.
Thank you very much. Are there any further comments from the board?
Good comment, Amy.
Huh?
Good comment.
All right, if not, moving forward to our public hearing phase.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You got one.
Just saw this one go up.
I'm sorry.
Mayor just had a
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. Mayor Preciado.
Yeah, I also would like to just mention that, open burning does affect the public health in our communities, and sometimes we are affected even though we're far away from it. From the past, I've seen where, we may get smoke from fire from far away, Sacramento, or, the south that will come into the Central Valley. But I think it's also important to consider, it's probably not part of the agenda right now, but to consider the fires that happen unintended. Like, for example, there was a big fire on a compost facility close to my community, and that smoke traveled like 25 miles. That, I think collaboration goes a long way, because which will also kind of help those entities, farmers, business people, or whatever the case may be, like empty fields, we were protecting the public health. I think somehow, sometimes they don't have the equipment, they don't have the manpower, and I think sometimes it's difficult to have other entities that actually have the equipment and the manpower, but they don't get involved because it doesn't necessarily involve a county issue or a community issue. But I think we need to somehow in the future have something that will all collaborate and help those fires to be put away as soon as possible. And also, I don't know, think about how we can, help everybody to put those fires, prevent it from happening or stopping, the sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we can go to public comment.
Yes. Are there any members of the public in Bakersfield to comment on this?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Okay. Any members of the public in Fresno like to comment? Looks like I see a few coming up.
Thanks for walking up early, man.
God. Happy New Year. I hope all of you had a great Christmas. Drew, thank you for everything you've done, even beyond the year. Immigration and all of that your city council has acted on. And thank you, okay? Yes, buddy, I was gonna start it off right. Chair Lewis, welcome. And of course, Vito, the new chair, and all of the board members. We have a couple issues we will need to, as Samir very clearly said, as we go forward. The size of a small farmer is no longer what it was because of regulatory mandates by this state. The minimum wage, the size of a small grower was 20, 30 acres. Sigma came in and made a big change. A 92-year-old acre, 92-year-old grower, children don't want the farm. So it's sold. So since Sigma came along, in my league, my average size used to be 60 acres. In 1969, 1970, through 1990. After that, my average acre small grower started creeping up. Today, a small grower for me in my organization is close to 120 is a small grower. My medium or smaller grower has grown to be a bigger grower to survive. So he or she has bought the grower next door, another 60, 80 acres. The farmer that has 300 or 400 acres, bought a 100-acre grower because he or she needs to grow to compete. So our grower system in this valley has dramatically is not what it was. And I think what the district and us worked on, the 500 to 499 to 101 and 101 to 2 acres, I think is a great marker for right now. And maybe 5 years, a small grower may be 500 acres. It may be 500 acres in this state, okay? First, support the 250. We can't lower that anymore, okay? Number two, support the CAP program, whatever we can get off of 617. This afternoon, we have a call with NRCS on its funding that they got some money into the programs called the RCPP program of asking for $25 million that the district will go after and run the burn program through the district. NRCS doesn't have the staff to even imagine to do something of what the district does. Important. Curtain burners, Dr. Sheriff, are required, are going to be needed. I have some real disease issues out there that from the growing grounds of nurseries to the production of rootstock going to farms carrying the disease, methyl bromide has been removed. All the soil fumigants are being removed from this insanity state under DPR. So that means diseases are going to happen. And we cannot grind and chip and spread the disease back into the ground. So working with the district and the staff, the ag commissioners and Kearney is to figure out how we are going to burn some of these diseases because we have to. We can't put them out on the farm anymore. Just can't keep adding to the problem. Small abandoned farms, we have those, and they are not an easy thing to touch. This district wants to do some of those things. They are very, very costly, and it's not an easy process. So maybe somehow we figure out how we do some type of voluntary program in there and assist and work with the county ag commissioner and folks to help clean that problem up. But to suddenly try to go in and take over things, we have found it to be the most, not a 1-year activity. It's a 4 or 5 year, just trying to get in who's in charge. So sometimes it's a mess. But again, I want to thank the beginning board. I want to thank everybody. Let's don't forget, it is not agriculture that has caused a lot of the health issues of smoke. It is the unmanageable forest that we have to deal with, that we've had over this last couple of years. It hasn't been ag at all. that have caused, and nobody talks about the uncontrolled fires. As one board member mentioned, those fires that are not, Mayor, you spoke about, uncontrolled, lighting up the hills, somebody throwing something, just like Roger's going to talk about probably on some other issues. But we do have to look at, air curtain burners are an important part of how we deal with disease. If not, we can't use that tool, then some of the diseases, we're going to have to burn them. We have just no choice. It's not fair to the grower. They shut down the biomass plants, so we can't take it there. When you shut that tool down, now to take it to a compost. I have a grower that's called a compost and throughout the valley and cannot take his product to the compost. And he's got a disease problem, and it's a legitimate disease problem. So I think we have a moving target as Samir and his team are continually working with us. NRCS is working with us. We couldn't ask for a better team of folks communicating, because that keeps us moving forward. I think what Dr. Pacheco Warner says is that we continually looking at how to resolve, not backing off, no, but the funding has to be there to help us. The state took it all away. And so now USDA is weighing in. This is not a federal problem. This is San Joaquin Valley, California problem. But USDA has stepped to the plate and said, how can we help you? We know you're going to have any money. So I appreciate Todd and his team working with Carlos Suarez, the state director, to see if we can get some immediate funding. We're talking about $25 million. And if we can get that to help us get through per year, even that the Farm Bill will not happen this year, but we're under the existing Farm Bill. So that means we could get $25 million a year. And that helps. So again, Councilman Lewis, thank you very much. And the board, Samir and Todd and you guys and Ryan, Lashi, for all your work. We're not going to give up. But I think we're doing our part tremendously. As you saw what we took away from 1 million tons. So thank you very much for the time. And I made it by the 3 minutes. I can't believe that. I know that you turned it off.
Luckily, I wasn't.
Thank you. Thank you.
Roger? I knew he went a long time because Roger went and sat back down.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you.
No comment. Good morning, members of the board. Roger Isom with the Western Agricultural Processors Association. The first thing I want to say is thanks for bringing this item forward and trying to help the ag industry work through this. I would urge support of the item as presented. I wouldn't mess with it at this point. We spent a lot of time analyzing what the district's proposed, and I think we've come to an agreement consensus among the ag industry. The one thing I would say, and I know this was alluded to, this issue is not going away. And I think somebody brought up walnuts, and I'll just use the example for this year where your very best walnuts are going to get you about 45 cents a pound. That's the very best you have. And UC Davis just released their cost of production at $1.24 a pound. So there's going to be more acreage coming out. This issue is not going away. So it's going to be here. The one thing I want to remind everybody, though, that this funding and this effort was really a stopgap. It was just to bridge between where the biomass plants started closing and some alternative that's going to take the place. We're always going to have biomass. We need to find a way to take this and convert it into something else. And one of the things that's happened is, I made this same plea a couple of years ago, and the California Air Resources Board started back up their Ag Biomass Collaborative. Unfortunately, that has now closed and gone back away. We are no further along than we were. We still hear a lot of facilities wanting to be built, a lot of discussion, but that's all it is at this point, is discussion. We still don't see those out there. And I have pushed and pushed to try to find out what are the hurdles. We need those facilities to be able to process this biomass. So I would encourage us to support this item, but also keep the push to try to find those other alternatives, find out why we can't get to the finish line. I know there's a lot of them out there being discussed. One we're involved with in Kern County, actually 2, but we've got to get them to the finish line and be able to process this. The last thing I would say is, again, urge support of this item. I know that Todd mentioned at the beginning that the ag industry is working to try to help in this very, very tough budget year to find additional money from the state. And we've already submitted those proposals. We're working and meeting with some of the budget subcommittee members, but it is going to be tough, as I know you all know. So we're going to keep that effort up, though, to keep our end of the bargain, that we would try to help with that. Just again, remind everybody, let's try to find those other alternatives so we can solve this problem long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger.
There's no indication of any online comments, so we have no further comments.
Okay, bring it back to the board. Member Mendez?
Yeah, I want to make a motion to do the staff recommendation.
Second. We're on a roll, buddy.
I have a motion and a second.
Okay.
With members dapping each other.
Yeah.
Amazing. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Aye.
Mr. Reyna?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Sheglian?
Hi.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you very much. And I had stepped out on that item, and I want to thank Vice Chair Lewis for quickly taking over for me. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 9, approve the district's 2024 legislative platform, and Tom will be presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So each year we come to you, usually in January, and talk about our legislative platform. A lot of the issues remain the same, but we also each year look for new issues, and as we have discussions throughout the year, we put additional items on the platform for discussion. What I'm going to do is go over a brief overview of why this is important, to talk about some of the priorities we have for this year, and then also introduce some of our partners in this, our advocates in DC, Washington, DC, and Sacramento, for a little bit of a state of play discussion and talk about challenges and opportunities as we move forward. So just a reminder, when we deal with air quality, it's important to realize that we have a lot of responsibility, but we have limited authority. And so we have to work with a lot of other entities to be successful. And, you know, generally the air quality agencies, the air districts, we develop the plans to bring our region into attainment. We also have the primary authority to regulate stationary and regulatory programs. And then we also try to seek incentives to get some mobile source emission reductions, because we don't have direct authority over those sources of pollution, mobile sources. That is controlled by the state and the federal government. And in many cases, depending on the pollutant, that can be up to 85% of our challenge here in the Valley. So we need to work with those other folks to get reductions in those categories, either through the California Air Resources Board or EPA. Also, in California, it's been this way for a while, but EPA has become more active. Greenhouse gases. So CARB has the primary authority in California to regulate greenhouse gases, and that overlaps both our authority on stationary sources and deals with mobile issues as well. The federal government has gotten more involved in that area, primarily through funding programs in recent years, so that's become important. We also work with the entities a lot of you come from, cities and counties, on land use and transportation planning to try to make sure that we're doing everything we can to generate, develop efficient communities that reduce travel wherever we can as well. So the Air District, you know, we have a long history of doing what we can on the regulatory side. Emissions from sources under our control have been reduced by over 90%. Our incentive programs have grown dramatically over the last 20 years. They're recognized, you know, throughout the state as being some of the most efficient and effective programs. It's incredible to see this number, really, knowing from where we came from. $6.2 billion in public-private investment on voluntary incentive measures to reduce emissions, with huge emission reductions coming from those. So that's quite an achievement, and it's something we continue to try to build upon. I mentioned mobile sources are the largest source, so we continue to advocate not only for incentive funds, but we try to work with the state and federal government on their regulatory authority in a common sense fashion. So we oftentimes are pushing them to take action, but we also tend to remind them, how to deal with some of the smaller folks that may have challenges under those regulatory programs. And why we've made significant progress, there's continuous new standards, and we can't continue to make progress without strong state and federal support. So at the beginning of every year, we have your board we present the platform and have your board adopt that, and then go forward with those top priorities and share them with our policymakers at the state and federal level. So I'm going to go through a very quick Cliff Notes version of the platform. Each one of these, if you unpack them, could be a hours long discussion, but I'll go through them all and then introduce our advocates and have them talk a little, and we can talk a little bit more about any of these in depth if you would like. So we have a kind of a catch-all at the front end. We pursue funding pretty much anywhere we can find it for our programs. It's everything from replacing ag equipment, trucks, vehicles, the Clean Cars for All program that helps our low-income residents. We look for funding through the state budget. It's a challenging year. The cap and trade program at the state, through the federal programs, IRA and Bill. We've developed incentive programs at the state level that we've taken advantage of through the Targeted Airship Program, Diesel Emission Reduction Act. So long story short, Farm Bill is going to be a big opportunity this year. We look wherever we can to find money to help us with those programs. I mentioned the state and federal government are active on greenhouse gas reduction measures. We look at those measures and try to encourage them to prioritize those measures that also get emission reductions and criteria pollutants, so like ozone precursors and particulates or toxics, and we support them on those efforts. Also, as new climate initiatives come along, we try to help shape those so they're beneficial for the Valley, and make sure that we're taking all of our opportunities from those as well. The Valley has a lot of economic challenges as well. We've pushed both at the state and federal level for programs to help our impacted communities. AB 617 is one of those, but there have been a variety of them. And the Air District has done very well on funding and bringing funds to those communities, here in the Valley. Transformative investments in low carbon. I mentioned cap and trade, but at the federal level, there are huge investments being made right now in low carbon programs, and we're looking for all the opportunities to bring those funds to the Valley and move forward. Oftentimes, there are co-benefits for criteria pollutants from those expenditures. And so not only do we apply directly, but we also try to make others in the Valley aware of those opportunities to make sure we're maximizing the benefit here in the San Joaquin Valley. The Clean Air Act was last majorly amended in 1990. We tend to be the canary in the coal mine because of the challenges we face. And so we run into a lot of the hurdles that kind of come up. So we continue to work with EPA on making sure the Clean Air Act is being implemented in a streamlined and efficient manner. This last year was a big effort on contingency measures, for instance, where we were the first area out the gate after some court decisions, to use new EPA guidance. And so that takes a lot of time and effort to make sure that those EPA policies are, efficient and streamlined. And we really help shape those on a national level because we tend to hit those issues before others do. I mentioned already the federal government and state government have authority over mobile sources. At the federal level, interstate trucking and locomotives, ships and planes as well, but the two big ones are interstate trucking and locomotives. We want to make sure they're doing their part to get emission reductions from the categories that they have authority over. On the trucking issue, California's been very aggressive, but we get a lot of pass-through traffic from other states. And not only is it an equity issue, since we're trying to meet federal standards, that those out-of-state trucks are also being held to a high standard. But we can't get as much progress unless EPA is doing their part. There's a lot of push, and there's been discussion today already about zero emission and near zero emission vehicles. There's a balance. We want to keep pushing to get to zero everywhere we can, but we don't want to delay progress where there's maybe near zero options available. We want to make sure we're deploying those to get near-term emission reductions. The greenhouse gas targets tend to be much further out. We have targets, basically in the next 5 years that we need to meet. And so we need to pull some of those emission reductions forward where we couldn't get there with zero, but we might be able to get there with near zero technologies. We had a big discussion at the study session about infrastructure challenges. One of the things we're seeing as we're trying to push those technologies forward is the infrastructure, not just charging infrastructure, but the electric utility infrastructure isn't there to meet those needs. And so we're pushing for the state agencies to coordinate and to make sure that, we're working with everyone to make that the Valley's ready to provide the infrastructure needed when we're trying to deploy that equipment. The ag industry is seeing this with, even off, like for forklifts and other things, that it's a big challenge. Light duty vehicles are a challenge, but heavy duty is a real challenge because the power loads are much higher when you're dealing with them, and there's a lot more infrastructure needs to make that effective. We just talked about alternatives to ag burning. We continue to push at the state level and at the federal level, NRCS and others. We have been engaging going back the last couple of years on the Farm Bill that's in development. The Farm Bill is a marathon, not a sprint. We're going to keep having those discussions and push for, amongst other things, alternative to ag burning funding. There was discussion about the impacts of people fallowing land in the previous item as well, and we're looking for funding efforts to help address those dust issues and other things that may come with fallowing of land and make sure that we're mitigating air quality impacts. One of the things, we talk about deployment of cutting edge technology, but there's also, more need to do research and development to make sure that that next generation of equipment's available for stationary sources, mobile sources, and others. And so we look for opportunities to work with the state and federal government on funding technology demonstration efforts and to pull those technologies forward and make them, commercially available so we can deploy them here in the Valley. One of the issues that we've been kind of a pioneer in, and it still needs a lot more work, is underfire charbroilers. There's a lot of pressure to reduce smoke from cooking in the urban areas. But it's a really challenging category to deal with, especially for equipment that's already been, put in place. It's very difficult to retrofit. And so we think this isn't just an issue for the Valley. This is a localized air pollution issue, and we share it with others. And so we're looking for support from the state and federal government to help move that technology forward and look for available equipment to move that issue forward more. Another thing we discussed at the study session was the issue of illegal fireworks. I don't think, in enforcement and other things, I think we would need to work with our local partners. I don't think we'd necessarily be the lead on this, but we're looking for opportunities to make some progress on this category as far as reducing the usage of illegal fireworks in our communities that causes other issues other than just air quality as well. But we wanted to make sure we captured that and that we're working with others where possible. And then finally, an issue that is always on our list when we're talking with folks is dealing with the forest management issues and wildfires. We say it every time, but the worst air quality we've seen in a generation is in conjunction with those events. There are some tools as far as flagging that, but we'd rather just not have the issues to begin with. So we continue to work to make sure that sufficient resources are being deployed, and we're helping to overcome regulatory barriers and other things that stop decent forest management issues. So just real quick at the federal level, I mentioned the work with EPA continues. That's always a big issue. We have a number of plans and programs in progress. We deal with things like exceptional events, contingency, and so that's an ongoing discussion that you know, during the coming year, I think will be just as active as it was last year. We continue to advocate for federal resources. There's, I mentioned the targeted airshed program that we helped develop, the DEER program, the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. Regularly, when these programs open, our projects are like ranked the top 5 in the country. And so we always do very well in those. So we continue to try to plus those up as much as we can, and other EPA grants. There's the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a lot of money available. We have a multi-department group that gets together and looks at those opportunities and looks to where we can apply, not just at EPA, Department of Transportation, USDA, across the federal government. This money is spread. It's a huge effort just to track and look at these opportunities, but we continue to do that. I mentioned the Farm Bill development continues. Lynn Jaquez, who represents us back in DC, will talk about the environment in DC. I don't know that we'll get a Farm Bill this year, but we're going to keep telling people what our priorities are and make sure that they're included. With working with EPA, as I mentioned, we have a number of plans that we'll be submitting to them. Oftentimes those languish for a period of time, and we want to make sure that they act on them while they're fresh, because as a plan sits there, other issues come up, and then it makes it difficult to get improved. Exceptional events is going to be a big issue. Guidance, there's discussion right now that we're looking for a new particulate standard that's going to come out, but after the standards are released, EPA issues guidance on what the requirements are to meet that standard. And there's oftentimes a gap that is challenging when that happens. So we'll continue to talk about that and work on contingency and other issues with EPA. At the state level, there are a lot of issues, but the biggest issue right now is the state budget. And we've done very well in recent years to bring money from the cap and trade program and others to the Valley. And this year, we're going to need to use all the tools that are available to us to try to make any progress. The governor released his budget last week. The Legislative Analyst Office has looked at the budget. The deficit projections are 38 to 68, depending on who you talk to and what's included in the baseline, what's not. And there's a lot of shell games going on. But in the governor's proposal, a number of our programs were zeroed out, including the farmer program and the ag burn program. Farmer program was zeroed out last year, and we were able to build it up to 75 million. This is a bigger challenge this year, so we're going to continue to try and work with anybody that shares our goals in that area. So yeah, we'll continue to work with our partners and our legislative delegation on those issues. With that, I would like to introduce our federal advocate, Lynn Jaquez, who has represented us very ably for a long time. She's now partnered up with another group called Hush Blackwell. So it was CJ Lake was what you heard along, but you might start hearing different names. But it's the same people, and I wanted to introduce Lynn to give her a chance to talk about the environment at the federal level.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, we'd like to see you.
I would like to be seen, actually, but I don't know how to activate the camera on this end. So in any event, happy to try to do so. Wish I were there, actually. I might pop in next month to surprise you all. But things are very active as we speak. We, of course, had I'm just going to say, slightly interesting first session of the 118th Congress. And we are now 2 weeks into the second session, into our second week, actually, of the second session of the there. Okay. Yay. So, as I said, into our second week of the second session of the 118th Congress, and it's proving, perhaps while not quite as dramatic, hopefully, but certainly interesting and challenging. As we speak, or as I am speaking to you all right now, of course, you all know that we have not resolved the FY24 funding solution for the federal governments and the agencies to remain funded beyond their current levels due to several competing priorities and approaches. We have been operating on a continuing resolution, several continuing resolutions since the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. And as I'm speaking to you right now, the Senate is proceeding to vote on the next continuing resolution that will still maintain a two-tiered approach with 4 agencies being extended funding through March 1st, and the remaining 8 agencies being extended funding through March 8th. And it looks to be, the Senate is fast tracking it. They have enough votes, it will go through. The House has announced that it will vote later today, and it is giddy-upping out of town because snow is once again predicted for Washington, D.C. starting later on this afternoon tomorrow, and you know what a few flakes does to the flaky capital. So everybody's trying to get out of town. I think that bodes well for a very expeditious processing of this next CR. Now, all that does is kick the can down the road. We do at least have some top line numbers agreed to, which are essentially the same that was agreed to under the FRA last September and early October, which led to the drama in the House, I will say. We've got those top line numbers. The appropriators are working on turning those into the specific 12 subcommittee allocation numbers so that they can proceed to get these complete by March 1st and March 8th. But that is still by no means a done deal. And I will just say that the specter that was included in the FRA that is hanging over all of this is that if they cannot reach a full funding if they cannot reach a full funding agreement and omnibus, minibuses, standalone bills, however it's going to proceed forward, we have a 1% across the board sequestration cut going into effect basically April 30th. And it's going to be very interesting, quite frankly, because that will really result in some quite drastic reductions in anticipated funding in many agencies, including the Department of Defense, at a time when that agency is in fact seeking supplementals for foreign aid and other kinds of things. So there is a very shifting dynamic as to whether it's a good thing to go ahead and let this sequestration go through and accomplish some of the budget cuts that some of the proponents of those cuts were not able to secure within their own caucus, quite frankly, and whether they will just stymie a CR. So we are still very much fraught and caught up in the FY24 funding battles, which should have been over October 1st, but of course have never been for quite some time. And that has led to a delay in the introduction of the FY25 budget, which gives us an idea, of course, of what funds and other kinds of things that we can proceed and what the priorities of the agencies will be for funding for projects and proposals that we might want to pursue. So at this point in time, we do not really expect an FY25 budget request submission by the administration until after FY24 is in some fashion closed out. Whether that's a year-long CR, which nobody seems to want at this point, or figuring out some numbers. So so that has delayed that introduction. In addition, as you may recall, the annual State of the Union is done at the invitation of the Speaker of the House to the President. Traditionally, that State of the Union has always, and that invitation has generally been issued around the end of January, prior to the budget submission, the first Tuesday in February. Well, this year, that invitation was just extended 2 weeks ago, and the date was set for March 7th so that it would occur after Super Tuesday primaries. What that does is further delay some of the budget request and administration activities even until after that. So a CR until March, a budget delay until March, and a State of the Union until March. March is going to be a very busy time. It looks like, and hopefully spending February wrapping up FY24 and getting that off the table, so to speak. So those are sort of immediate deadlines. Of course, you all are very much aware the narrow majorities that both the Senate and the House hold that make it very difficult. The Senate obviously has been used to operating with narrow majorities and the lack of a filibuster-proof 60-vote majority for quite some time. They figured out how to push things forward and get it out. The House is just a little bit more fractious, and with retirements, resignations, and illnesses, we are down to a 2-vote majority in the House through the end of February until we have some special elections to fill in some of the gaps, and until our majority leader Scalise returns from cancer treatment. So it's very, and with the absences at any given time, there may not even be a majority. It may actually be a majority minority at any given day. So that, of course, makes the scheduling of votes and floor action and everything very, very difficult for Speaker Johnson. And I wish him, great good luck with that. And hopefully we'll see what happens after the continuing resolution goes through. So once we have the budget, once we have, that introduction, we are off into our typical funding year, although of course it is a presidential election year and therefore nothing will be typical. And as you can imagine and recall, in election years, a lot of the legislative activity ends right around the August recess, with September again being fraught with the funding issue of whether they're going to push it into the next year or if they're going to try to get something done for FY25 at that point. And then it becomes very much, the campaigning period of time. The schedule this year has a month-long recess in October through the election in November, with a lame duck coming back already, a lame duck scheduled in November, which gives a pretty good indication that no funding decisions are going to be made prior to the elections. At the same time, we have this additional discussion, conversation, challenge going on around the foreign aid package that has now also, as I know you have read, been tied up with border security, border integrity measures, and whether additional funding for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel would come forward in some fashion with that. There was a meeting at the White House yesterday to try to press further on Ukraine aid. And I think a lot of emphasis on trying to move that without some of these other strings, but I don't really see that happening. Senator Schumer has announced that the Senate may move to a Ukraine/border integrity proposal next week. We've heard those kinds of things before. I don't think that there is anything concrete yet. There's no draft language yet on that, but that is certainly occupying everybody's minds, along with other kinds of issues. So with that said, we then also, as Tom had mentioned in our federal legislative agenda, focusing on farm bill programs and funding bills that bring money back to the Valley. Very, very excited about the $56 million electric vehicle charging freight corridor funds that came to the Valley through the programs. And believe me, the one thing that will continue this year is the discretionary grant NOFAs and release of the advanced funding that was included in the IIJA and in the IRA. And our staff has been fantastic at identifying opportunities, whether it's in the EPA and our targeted airshed and others, and we will continue to press very hard on trying to bring those dollars back, which impacts us, sort of boots on the ground, while the larger issues of whether an overall FY 24-25 bill will go forward in some fashion, or whether we can get a farm bill that has our EQIP and ag burning technology alternatives and other climate smart agricultural programs included in it, remains to be seen. I will give you an update on the farm bill as well that is happening in real time, in that G.T. Thompson, who's chair on the House side, announced yesterday that he's going to try to have draft text on a farm bill by March, and that the ag workforce working group, labor group that is part of that, will produce their final report by the end of February. At the same time, Chair Stabenow on the Senate side released a letter earlier today indicating her outline for some of the programs in a Senate crafted farm bill, and urging folks to get serious about starting to draft it, because obviously, even though it had been due to expire last September, there still was no progress made or text released through all of last year. So now it's due to expire September 30th of 2024 this year. And I think it's a good sign that the chairs in both chambers are saying it's really time to put pen to paper and produce what we want to do here. I will say there's not an historical precedent to producing a farm bill in an election year, just because of the trade-offs that have to happen between crop insurance and subsidy and market programs with nutrition and food security programs that are contained in the bill. And that's always a political balance. So, but we do have movement on that, and we have every indication, thanks to actually the board and staff's fantastic advocacy last year, that our specific funding requests for both EQIP and ag burning and other kinds of technology demonstrations that will benefit us in the Valley will definitely be included in some fashion, certainly on the House side. And we are continuing to work on the Senate side, where our senator is very, our senior senator now is very supportive of that. On a very sort of, I guess I'm going to say, myopic viewpoint, I lament, as Tom indicated, have been doing this for some years, and I have been spoiled by the visibility and elevation of California members to committee chairs and positions of leadership, and 20+ years of seniority in the Senate, which means something. And it's quite stunning to now sort of almost go back to square one. We don't have either any speaker of either party, a majority leader, a minority leader. We don't have any. The highest ranking leader that we have is Pete Aguilar for conference chair. And so it's important to have somebody in that position, but we have been a bit spoiled in those individuals being able to take care of the state interests from time to time. Likewise, on the Senate side, you know, we have a senior senator who's been there slightly over 2 years, and we have a placeholder senator after enjoying the longevity of 2 former senators. You know, they've been there for quite some time and built up seniority. So it's an interesting time for those of us that advocate at the federal level within Congress and the administration on California interests. But it's just, you know, also look at it as an opportunity and a challenge to raise our issues and visibility once again. We have a good, strong Valley delegation that is very strongly supportive of us, both majority and minority, in our proposals and our objectives, and really look forward to having as many of the board members and obviously Samir and Tom and others come back to DC and lend the voices, which is so critical to our platform. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions to the ability that I can.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn. You have a very elegant and classy way of explaining the dysfunction of DC. Thank you. Any questions for Lynn?
I just got one. Len, this is Supervisor Mendes.
Yes.
It's good to be able to see you and hear you. But do you think we've gotten to the point where we have government on automatic pilot?
I will say it depends on the policies, right? And at this point in time, because we have multi-year authorizations, and that's really what we did. If you look at 87 new programs that were passed in 2022 alone, with advanced appropriations that allows the agencies to basically go out and do their thing. The need, other than setting the funding levels for all of the other programs, I think that was a very calculated tactic. Understanding how narrow the majorities and minorities were and how difficult finding consensus across the board, on this side and this side, and the narrowing out and hollowing out, of the middle. So I would not say that it's on automatic pilot, because we watch very carefully the agencies, with their policies and regulations can do a little bit of mischief, and being active in the agricultural space and in the labor space, I keep an eye on the Department of Labor for everybody from time to time, and there are some I will just say some aspirational regulatory proposals that are out there that would have a significant impact in our workspace and environment, and so that continues, and everybody needs to keep an eye on that. The automatic pilot is the continuing resolutions, right? That's the automatic pilot. And it's interesting, Supervisor Mendes, as you know, Speaker Johnson pledged in December that he was having no more continuing resolutions. And at the same time, when the top line numbers were negotiated with the IRS deductions and the clawbacks from some of the COVID funding to everybody's satisfaction, he felt that they were enough on the right track in order to extend it a little bit further so that they could get completion on the 12 individual bills. There's still, in my humble opinion, there may not be an omnibus, but there'll be 2 minibuses, right? One with 4 and one with 8. So I agree with your characterization of automatic pilot as a result of CRs, but also we have also ended up with omnibuses, every year. We've never ended up with a year-long CR, which would put us on automatic pilot. And I don't think we will this year because of this sequestration threat, which is very significant.
Right. Thank you. Good analogy.
Thank you, Lynn. It's okay.
Great. Well, thank you, Lynn. Now I'd like to introduce Sylvia Solis-Shaw with Shaw, Yoder, Antwi, Smeltzer, and Lang.
Dewey, Cheatham.
To talk about the state issues. I mentioned Lynn representing us for a long time. Sylvia, as well as the state level, has done a outstanding job of getting us in front of the people we need to get in front of and giving us suggestions as we deal with the issues in Sacramento. And so I wanted to give Sylvia an opportunity to talk about the state of play up there and budget issues and others. So Sylvia.
Thank you, Tom. Sorry. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. I see you sneaking off. Again, Sylvia Solis-Shaw with Shaw, Yoder, Antwi, Smeltzer, and Lang. My colleague Paul Yoder and I have been proud to represent the district for well over a decade now, and I'd like to thank you for the time this morning. As Tom indicated earlier, the budget outlook for the state as a whole and air districts in particular has changed significantly from record surpluses of the last couple of years to very large deficits, and I should say for air quality programs in particular. Last week, Governor Newsom released the 24-25 state budget. He projected the deficit at $37.9 billion, and as Tom alluded to earlier, that is a significant difference from the $68 billion deficit that was projected by the Legislative Analyst's Office last month. The governor attributes the budget deficit to substantial decline in the stock market that drove down revenues and as well as the unprecedented delays in income tax collections, which make up a significant share of the big three general fund revenue sources, which are personal income, sales, and corporation taxes. Overall, the governor attempts to balance the budget using a combination of measures such as drawing down from the state's reserve funds, and that's approximately $13 billion that they're going to draw down, approximately $8.5 billion in spending cuts. Climate reductions within are the largest category of proposed reductions, with $2.9 billion in proposed cuts. There will be delayed funding for multiple items and spreading those funds across a 3-year period beginning in 2025-26. And then there will also be fund shifts in the amount of $3.4 billion, and that includes using greenhouse gas revenue funds instead of general fund dollars to fund several programs with potential climate impacts. So just going back a second to touch on the significant difference on the size of the deficit between what the governor is projecting and what the LAO has projected. According to the governor, half of that difference is in the projections of future revenues, and the remainder is mostly in differences on spending estimates. The governor definitely has a more optimistic view of what the projected revenues for the state will be in the next few months. March, April, May, that's when we see the bulk of state revenue collections come in. And that's going to come in and happen at the same time the budget is being crafted and then finalized in June. So we will get a better sense of who actually is closer to the right deficit number as we approach the spring of this year. I would also like to mention that the governor announced that he will be entering negotiations with the legislature on a education facilities bond, and which the legislature supports, but the legislature will also continue to push a climate bond that would also be considered on the November 2024 ballot, and that could be of interest to the district. And we'll see what that looks like as negotiations continue at the Capitol. These budget discussions are going to really permeate all aspects of the work being done in the Capitol this year, including legislation. And this comes in the midst of whirlwind changes in the leadership of each house of the legislature. So on June 30th of last year, the Assembly Democrats selected Robert Rivas as their new speaker, taking over for Anthony Rendon from Los Angeles. Rivas is from the Central Coast of California. He was first elected to the Assembly in 2018. After he was sworn in on June 30th, he announced his own leadership team, new majority leader, and he made a couple of significant committee chair changes. But at the end of last year, he announced a full roster of changes to committee chairs. And then a couple of weeks ago, he announced changes to the makeup and membership of each of the committees. So we're really starting with a new batch of folks in January. Of note, to the Valley Assembly member Esmeralda Soria was appointed chair of the Assembly Agricultural Committee. Assembly member Villa Padua was named chair of the Assembly Jobs and Economic Development Committee. Assemblymember Heath Flora will continue to serve as vice chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and Vince Fong will continue to serve as chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee. Now, that's just in the Assembly. Moving on to the State Senate, in August of last year, the Senate Democrats chose Mike McGuire to serve as successor to the current Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins, who's from San Diego. This transition will go into effect on February 5th, so in a matter of weeks. Senator McGuire, who comes from Sonoma County, this district is mostly suburban and rural, again, a change from a more urban representative. He's very well liked, respected in his caucus, and we expect to see some committee chair changes announced after he is sworn in on February 5th. Just another quick note regarding Senator McGuire, he is termed out in 2026. So he will only be pro tem for a couple of years, which is pretty short considering how long pro tems have been in place the last few years. Excuse me. And of course, to add more excitement to all of the changes happening at the Capitol, with the budget negotiations, we're at the beginning of an election year, and there are 23 open seats in the Assembly, and that's due to members being termed out or running for Congress or other offices. And there are 11 open seats in the state Senate. So definitely a very challenging time. And the bill introduction deadline is in 1 month, February 16th. Given an election year, some members introduce fewer bills. In a tight budget year, you also see fewer bills actually make, the final push to the governor's desk. So overall, a unique and challenging legislative session, but we'll work with Tom and Mr. Shake to secure state funding and work hard to represent the Valley in Sacramento. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Sylvia. Any questions? Okay, I don't see any. It's really good.
Yeah, so the legislative platform is before you for consideration and action. We're happy to take any questions on the platform itself and just turn it back to you, Chair and board members, for any action on and obviously also public comments on the platform.
I got it. I see no questions from board members, so we're going to go to the public comment.
Okay, are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comments in the South.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Looks like we do have a member of the public who would like to speak in Fresno.
Hello, my name is Nancy Richardson. I want to heap more praise on you. You've had quite a lot of it today, but I hope you could stand just a little bit more. On your legislative platform, I think it is a model of clarity. I've never seen one that well done. I saw it a year ago, and I see that you continue to update it, but it is comprehensive. It is polite, but clear on where you're going. And I see in the course of a year, you do work on all of that stuff. So congratulations. I think you folks, all of you, have creativity, great problem-solving skills, and a can-do attitude that is wonderful. That plus there's attention to detail that makes it possible to actually get some of these things done. You have effective interaction with the public and with legislators. And perhaps most importantly, you have astute judgments about how to balance, actually how to dance the dance of competing interests. All of that in clean audits. Congratulations to all of you.
Thank you very much. And it's mostly because of Drew Bessinger. And I keep heaping praise on him all day long.
That was the dancing part.
That was it. Thank you for those comments.
I don't see any other in-person comments. We do have one online, Connie Young.
Welcome back, Connie.
Yes, hi, thank you. So I would like to second all that Nancy Richardson just said. I agree completely. I appreciate the statement acknowledging the potential impacts that a changing climate will have on local air quality. When I first began attending these meetings about 5 years ago, climate change was almost never mentioned. So to see it included in your legislative priorities is very heartening. Thank you. Regarding the justifiable concern about mobile source emissions, I'd like to see more emphasis on and funding for low-tech and relatively low-cost measures, like promoting and facilitating active transportation, public transport, as well as vigorously opposing sprawl. Many people, myself included, wouldn't use cars if there were reliable and convenient alternatives. Lastly, I'm glad to see that you will make efforts to reduce the availability and use of illegal fireworks. I would encourage you to go even further and advocate for banning them altogether. Besides fouling the air, they frighten animals and traumatize our veterans with PTSD. I don't think the desire of people to be entertained should take priority over the ability of vulnerable Valley residents to breathe and to enjoy our Independence Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie.
No further comments.
Okay, Dr. Sheriffs?
Thank you. What clarity of presentations. Good, thank you. And thank you for the observations from the public about that. I had a thought early in the discussion, thinking about the jurisdictional roles and, how do we maximize what we have available to us? And thinking about where the primary authority is for the district, the creativity, looking to incentives to help bend the mobile curve. One thing that I think we could do a lot more of, public education as an incentive to helping the public, the general public, do more in terms of air quality issues, in terms of climate issues, to help educate them about their role, their contribution. And we do a lot of public education. We do a lot of outreach. I think there's an opportunity there to accomplish more, to bend that part of the curve that we don't have a jurisdictional role in, but in fact is critical to our success.
Motion.
Yeah. Yep. Seeing nothing else, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept.
Second. It's a trifecta.
Accept this. Oh, you seconded it?
Call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Bessinger,
Yes.
Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yeah.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Preciado,
Yes.
Mr. Reyna,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Schicklin,
Aye.
Mr. Chiesa,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 10. Thank you, Sylvia, for being here. Appoint ad hoc subcommittee for hearing board reappointments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As many of you know, the district's hearing board, which is created by the Health and Safety Code, is a very important part of the district's permitting process. It's a quasi judiciary body that hears and decides petitions for variances from the district's rules and regulations. It hears and decides petitions for abatement orders, as well as permit appeals. The hearing board sits in 3 regions, and there are 5 members per region, as well as alternates for each of those 5 members that are appointed by the governing board to serve 3-year terms. And so each year we ask the governing board to appoint 2 members from each region to serve on an ad hoc subcommittee to consider those hearing board members who are up for reappointment. And so I am asking for 2 members from each region to do that. And I promise that it is a very, very minimal time commitment. It's minutes, if not seconds, of time commitment to serve on this ad hoc subcommittee. It's a process that I guide through.
You're saying it's a light.
It's a light sentence, yes.
So let's go through the,
So for the northern region, we need 2 members to serve on that. From the northern region, who would like to serve?
let's see.
I'd be willing to do so.
Okay, so
There's
we
the 2
have
Merced
and
representatives.
Deborah Lewis, Mr. Pereira. Okay, thank you. From the central region?
I'd be willing to do that.
I believe you're in the
The
southern
south.
region,
Well,
but we'll put you on the south.
Yeah.
Great.
When it gets to my region,
Okay.
I'm there.
Supervisor McCauley from the central region, and who else from the central?
Someone,
She didn't volunteer.
no, she's in the south. I'm just looking at the
Bob,
names.
Go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Buddy's going to do it.
Supervisor Mendez,
In the
thank you.
south, we have
And from the
Schicklin.
south, we have Amy Shucklin. And
I'm looking at the 2 folks from the south down in the Bakersfield.
yeah, we need either, yeah. Okay. Councilmember Reyna. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for agreeing to serve.
And I will be in touch with you about those recommendations
Okay.
within the next couple weeks or so.
Yeah, no action required on that, no public comment. Okay, on to item 11, verbal report on California's Air Resources Board activities. Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. I think that right now, you should know that there's a lot of focus on engagement around implementation of the last 2 years of regulations. So I think that there's a lot of that. I think obviously the state budget will require a lot of movement. So I definitely continue to advocate for the San Joaquin Valley to get its fair share of everything. And I mean, like minutes, like there was a recent settlement with Cummings that you all may have seen in the news for defeat devices. And right away, Samir and I both staked our stake down for some of that to come to the San Joaquin Valley. So I think that there's some of that coming in. So I just look forward to a year of more engagement, more roundtables with our partners, our ag partners, our industry partners, our EJ partners on a lot of ensuring implementation. And in terms of, yeah, so I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Dr. Pacheco Warner? Okay, on to the executive director.
Just a couple of, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick updates for the board and the public. It was mentioned earlier that there's a meeting coming up January 31st. That's going to involve appointing a replacement large city role to the board, as well as the reappointment of Vice Chair Deborah Lewis. So we're hoping to move forward with that and have the attendance needed, for that meeting to be done. Also, it was noted, and you've probably seen some media already on this. We did recently receive a couple of days ago word that we got a $56 million grant, which was, thank you for the applause there. Yeah, so we put in a large project forward to the Federal Highway Administration and received the third biggest award in the country and the biggest in California for a corridor project, a couple of locations in the valley with heavy duty truck charging and vehicle leasing that we'll continue to share more information on. It's actually going to come to the board in February, so a little bit just a heads up on this to be accepted into the budget, and we'll have a lot more conversation and celebrate that award at that meeting as that gets brought to the board. That we talked a lot about the governor's budget. So I think the short story on that is that we're going to be working very hard in the coming months to secure funding in that budget and hopefully turn that around in terms of some of the key programs that were just discussed. We'll continue delivering the 2024 kids calendars, the air quality calendars throughout the valley. So if you need any of those, please let me know. We're happy to get whatever number you think you can distribute to your constituents. We're really happy to share those. We're beginning to plan for the year, including the governing board study session. We'll be reaching out some more on that in terms of dates and just to start brainstorming from now, when and where that will be held, to just keep your eyes open for that. The Tulare World Ag Expo is coming up. I know that's a big deal. It's the World Ag Expo. It's a big deal to the world, not just Tulare County. So we're going to actually be there as usual. We'll have a booth and we'll be talking about everything ag related and encouraging participation in our programs and just doing the ongoing outreach that we do. So we'll be in Pavilion A if you happen to be at the show. And then lastly, the fireworks incentive program, the alternative. So let me restate that. The alternatives to fireworks incentive program is officially launching the first week of February. A little bit of a heads up. There have been a couple of inquiries that have come in, and we're already interacting actually on those inquiries, kind of coming out of the November board meeting. But please keep your eyes open for that. And if you have any questions or anybody that we should be talking to, just let us know directly, and we'll reach out to those individuals for anybody that's putting together these large shows and could maybe consider converting that or adding, reducing firework use and going to an alternatives setup for that. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair and board members, for any questions that you might have for me.
Quick question. When was the truck charging going to be on our agenda?
It's at the February board
February?
meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions for Samir? Okay, on to item 13, governing board comments. Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate folks, on so many milestones last year and opening up with, again, another historic grant. I mean, it's just amazing. And we're seeing the fruits and labors. I did peruse through the consent calendar, the stats, from last year, and our air is qualitatively and quantitatively getting better. And I think that is a really important thing to continue to highlight. And I mean, I didn't want to pull it from consent because it's, but I think it's important for everyone to know that these amazing grants, these amazing programs are yielding real results in our air. And they did so last year, even as we continue to have, challenges on a lot of other fronts. So I just really want to congratulate you all for that, and that it's in the numbers. So thank you.
Yep. Member Bessinger, I'm going to skip you. You get the last word today.
Okay.
Member Vice Chair Lewis.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Just a couple of comments. One in particular on open burning, and we talked about that in regards to. Oh. Okay. 1, 2, 3. In regards to open burning with ag, it was a very good discussion. And I know in my community, there are pockets of county area that's surrounded by city limits, and a particular resident came to me and complained about someone who was burning their personal stuff. And of course, our county didn't seem to do anything about it. So Supervisor Shecklin, thank you for your county being active in taking care of those problems. I would hope that our counties will help us, because that's important too. Ag burning affects a large space of people, but personal burning still affects people in their smaller space. And so that's just as important as the large burning. In regards to the disease chipping, thank you, Mr. Cunyo, for bringing that up. It was probably a thought in the back of my mind when I asked that, but I didn't quite know how to put it there. So as we remove these disease products out of the ground, we certainly don't want to get it into our food chain with animals and any other processes. So I'm glad that we've worked on that and continuing to work on that. Now, my bigger thing is, and thank you to our executive director for putting it in the report today, about illegal fireworks. It's a really big problem in the state of California, and our number one priority is around health issues. And even after they have exploded, there's still the debris that's left around. And I don't know how that reacts health-wise to people from all of that yellow dust debris that's left over from illegal fireworks. But I want to put a request out to Dr. Pacheco-Warner. I would like you to push with our CARBs to see if they want to take this on as a project. It's really near and dear to me. I despise and hate illegal fireworks. I'm happy that we're helping to fund the new form of fireworks through, what is it? Pardon?
Drones.
No, not drones. The alternatives, yes. Lasers, that's what I was thinking of. And that's a really good idea. It's more vast as to what you could do in your firework programs and what you're able to present to the public. So, I've passed that information on to our, citizens and our city council. I'm hoping that someone, within our city will take advantage of the funding that we have to try to, give one of the laser fireworks shows this year rather than doing the pyrotechnics as usual. But I'm hoping that CARB will take this on and try to resolve this as quickly as possible because we have this coming through the ocean and, you know, one of our neighboring states who produces that. And it's, you know, people are firing them off, not just on the 4th of July, but if their toenail hurts, they will fire off a firework. And so we just really need to find a way to kind of make this go away so that it becomes a more healthy environment for the residents of California. And one last thing, there is a member that sits on our board here who is having a birthday, and it's a milestone. So I'd like to congratulate that person and just say, you've been blessed to see all these years because it's a really big milestone, a really big milestone. So thank you, you know, to the board for acknowledging that person, and I just want to congratulate them. Well, thank you, board members. I'm just so happy. I'm so happy.
7-0?
That you, oh, it's way bigger than that. So neat, and you can figure it out. So anyway, that's my fun thing for today. And thank you, Samir, and to all the staff for the wonderful job that you do. It makes life really easy sitting up here and the questions that we ask a lot easier. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good job. Thanks, Vice Chair. And so, before I turn the mic over to you, I just want to say that today we're going to get trending on Twitter and Facebook, the hashtag #BeLikeDrew. And just so you know, and remember, you're one of the people responsible for picking a replacement. You know, you've had good interactions, and so that fits perfectly. Be like Drew. And I just removed you from my contacts. Thank you. Drew, you're up.
Well, if I was picking my ex-wife's next husband, that would be number 5. So, thank you for your kind words. Thank you for the beautiful plaque. I'm gonna have to find a Mediterranean restaurant to eat at the third Thursday for lunch. And like Douglas MacArthur said, old soldiers never fade away. Old soldiers never die, they just fade away. And I'm gonna fade away. Thank you.
Thank you for your service, Drew. Okay, we do have a closed session.
Yes, we do. There's one closed session item on the pending case, Central California Environmental Justice Network versus Leanne Randolph et al. And we do need to call for public comment before we go in.
Do we have any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to comment on the closed session item?
No comments in the South.
Thank you. In Modesto, do you have any members of the public that would like to comment on this?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public present in Fresno would like to comment? Seeing none, and then online.
Okay, and so we shall move to closed session, and thereafter I will come out and do a little report and call for adjournment at that
Okay,
time.
moving to closed session at 12:04.
Okay, thank you. The governing board met in closed session on item 14 on the agenda. A summary of any reportable actions taken in closed session will be provided to the clerk of the board, which will be available to the public upon request. And the meeting is adjourned